Okay, so hello everyone. We are here with a very exciting premiere of something that I've decided to call Red Gunner Guy or Red Rambles. It is going to be a podcast or podcast style episode focusing on StarCraft 2 lore. And here with me today is none other than my good friend Sub. I actually did not ask. How exactly do I pronounce your
So
name?
it's Subsourian, and hello, it's good to be on. It's the first
Yes.
time doing a show like this, so I'm excited.
So it's an honor to have you on. For those who don't know, Subsourian is actually,
Yes.
well, in my humble opinion, the most knowledgeable guy on Reddit about StarCraft 2 lore. He's also an admin of the StarCraft 2 of the StarCraft wiki. His Twitter page is up on the it's up on the screen. Exclamation mark co-caster if you're watching a Twitch chat, go and follow him on Twitter. And yes, do you want to give yourself a short introduction before we start things proper?
Hi, yeah. I'm just I'm Subsourian. I'm a big StarCraft lore fan. Red kind of went through it. I run the wiki. I used to do a series on basically just going through the nitty gritty of StarCraft, nitpicking the lore and all that. And I've been doing this for a few years, so I've got kind of a reputation as a lore guy. So
Hmm.
yeah, I'm happy to be on. I have a lot of strong opinions on the books, and this is one of my favorites, so it's a good place to start.
Yes, absolutely, absolutely. Oh, by the way, thank you, Eki Kendo One for using the commands. I put effort into that. I'm glad people use it. So to go into it, we are actually going to be going through a very specific book today. It is this here book. It is called I Mengsk. Oh, Devi Iki. I'm sorry if I got your name wrong. It's not just a law guy, the law guy.
Oh, thank you.
Yep. So yes, we'll be going through this book called I Mengsk, which I admit I did not buy, but I got from my local library. So
Oh,
awesome.
nice. I see. Yeah, and you got the Legends version. So if you want it, there's a re-released all most of the books in the Legends line, so
Hmm.
you can go pick it up. I have my old copy.
Oh man. KT Hohax's Hi Mengsk.
Hi, Kaido.
That's a good one. All right, so for those who are eventually watching on YouTube, we did this live on Twitch. Do come and follow. If you're watching on YouTube, first of all, if you're on Twitch, also do go and check out my YouTube. I do mostly StarCraft 2 videos of varying things, including a lore series where I've already gone through some of the comics. I had to put that on hiatus because I had to finish Nova Covert Ops first, but I'm doing that too. If you like this content, here comes the plug. Do like and subscribe. If not for me, for for the Zegling. Nam 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 nam
I
nam.
forgot. Yeah, I forgot about that circling.
Hmm.
And
I got to tell a quick story now that he's on the screen. It's so cute. This is what the timing of this was incredible because I got this the week after I switched to Zerg, and this is the reason I win PvZ.
oh yeah,
Yeah, it's
I have a
it's.
yeah I have the big Zergling slippers. I should bring those out. They are not very convenient. They are, but they look adorable.
Aww. Yeah, I've got as much buck as I can. Alright, alright, alright. But okay, we'll put the Zergling off on the side. Alright, so we do have a proper outline and we're not just gonna spitball it like a Silver League build order. Alright, so the first thing we want to go into as spoken about is a little bit about the publication history. Do you want to start with the publication history or do you want to start with the author?
I'll go with the kind of context surrounding why it was released. So there was a brief period after
Mm-hmm.
StarCraft One where there was a good amount of content coming out, and then from like 2002 to 2006, there was literally nothing, like
Ooh.
complete, because they were building up for StarCraft Ghost, which we know, of course, like didn't happen. But then in 2007, they announced StarCraft 2, and literally days later dropped the first book of a series called the DT Saga, Dark Templar Saga, which was kind of to set up some of the characters. And one of the characters they set up was the son of Arcturus
Mm.
Mengsk, Valerian Mengsk.
Yep.
And this book, and a lot of people were kind of like, didn't know where he was going to go, like, weren't sure on him.
Mm-hmm.
So this book came out also to really kind of cement the character, give him a backstory, but also go through the general Mengsk line, as Mengsk was going to be a big factor into the game, into the forthcoming StarCraft 2 game, and that was 2008, I believe. Yeah, 2008. Late 2008 was when the book was
Hmm.
published. But one of the interesting aspects is in the first Dark Templar book, it was written because they didn't know where they're going to take Valerian, whether he was going to be a good guy or a bad guy in the games.
Yep.
So they intentionally made it super ambiguous, and you can kind of see it in this book, but
Hmm.
it's slowly moving it towards this guy's actually pretty good, and we'll get into that later. But you can definitely see its place in the development of the
Oh
story.
yes. Actually, that's a great point. Okay, first of all, let me address our viewers in Twitch chat. We can't leave them behind. Davak says you say that like silver players actually have a build order. Well, that's the thing. Silver players know they're supposed to do some things, but they can't do them. Maybe I'm giving a bit too much credit to EU silver players. Maybe NA silver players less so. Thank you, Vito Santi, for coming along, and Valerian. Oh, here we go. Oh, here we go. I was just about to say. Okay, he said this right. Valerian is just Edwin, but his dad's racist instead of medicine.
So the the interesting bit with that
Mm.
is they both had the same voice actor nowadays, but Valerian had Josh Keaton before Anduin did. Um, yeah, but yeah, there's a lot of similarities between the two of them.
There
It's
are
been
there
a
are there's even a
here's the Storm Skin.
yeah,
Yeah,
there's
I
a
figured
Heroes of
that
the
you're gonna
Storm
bring up.
skin, and then I
I
saw
was
that
very.
I'm like yep, that's
I admit I'm very disappointed in the skin because it wasn't super detailed, but it
nah.
looks all right.
Yep, it's like okay, it's the pretty boy. Um,
Yeah, really.
uh,
And I mean, I guess they have a similar role, but they do have their actual stories are very divergent, I would say.
they they
Um,
they definitely are.
it's just a shame there's so many visual similarities because that comparison is brought up a ton.
I've seen the comment section on on YouTube videos. Yes, yes, they are. Um,
Yeah.
I think that's very interesting. You talk about that because oh, by the way, potential preview. If this does go well, I do want to do a series on the Dark Templar saga. That's going to be a much bigger fish to fry. I mean, physically, it's 3 books instead of one.
Hmm.
But something that a friend of mine said, which is that I have another friend who got into StarCraft only a year ago. He asked me to lend him the DT saga, and I did. And then he said that like, dude, the Valerian I read there is like so different from the Valerian I knew because the Valerian in the DT saga is almost a different person than you have at the end of Wings of Liberty. Which kind of makes sense
Yeah,
because things
it,
happened.
it was actually a big controversy, and you can actually see later in
Mm.
Heart of the Swarm and especially Nova Covert Ops, there's a bit of a return to, especially Flashpoint. Christy Golden's, who wrote Valerian initially, her interpretation of the character, which I think is a good one. Graham McNeil stays pretty true to that book
Mm.
interpretation, though I will say, and if we get to the DT saga, we'll go through that. Even the Dark Templar saga's interpretation is a little uneven because of that aforementioned. We need to make this character very ambiguous.
Yeah.
It gets even at the end and goes more towards. I know you're playing Nova Covert Ops now. That
Yeah.
one especially is very heavy with Valerian. That's more towards the book interpretation.
Yeah. In fact, as a complete side note, and oh man, I need to stop myself before we go off a tangent because we need to talk about the author. But when I read The Keep, I'm like, yeah, this sounds about right for Valerian. When I read a Nova Covert Ops, no, Nova, the comic The Keep, I did a video on
Hmm.
that. It's but it's a hard thing to say. I think we'll get into this. We're going to characters about how people can change due to experiences, but also stay the same, which is something that I do think that the I Mengsk book does pretty well. Um,
Oh,
oh,
definitely. Yeah. No,
okay,
we'll
okay,
get into
but
that.
all right, but we're going very far off tangent. Anything else about the overview you'd like to add? Again, thank you for that introduction. Before we go into the
Oh,
author.
yeah. No, yeah. Feel free.
All right, thank you very much. All right, so let's go into the author called Graham McNeil. It seems that he's a pretty big 40K writer.
Yeah, if you've ever read the oh god, it's the probably the premier Space Marine books, the Ultramarine Omnibus. He's really famous for those.
And
He's considered one of the big three: Stan Abnett, Sandy Mitchell, and Graham McNeil, which is interesting because I'm usually not a big fan of his 40K work, but I loved his StarCraft work. So
that's an interesting point. On screen, by the way, guys, is his website. You can go and check it out. I don't know about you, oh yeah, I'm sorry if I'm gonna get your name wrong throughout the series.
that's okay.
I apologize. I could not get his website to work.
Well, it might have some Flash elements, but
Oh
yeah, you
yeah.
could just look. Yeah, you could look up a archive of his work. He's very prolific. He's got a lot of work.
Oh yes, oh
Uh,
yes. In the overview series I did, which will be up on YouTube, it's up on Twitch right now. I did go through his Black Library stuff. He's written several of Horus Heresy books, and yeah, the
mhm.
background right here is Fulgur being an asshole
Yeah,
to Patarabo.
yeah,
What a surprise! But also,
yeah. I mean, he did a lot of the Horus Heresy stuff too. I eventually need to get into that, but I
yeah.
haven't. I
Also Eldari are
dipped in.
getting, their butt kicked. But that's neither here nor there. Alright, so do you know what he was like, or any idea of his side of frame of mind when he wrote this book? Was he a big
um,
author then?
he was pretty big then, most for his 40K
Mhm.
work, but this was at a time when StarCraft had also pulled a few 40K names. In spite of a lot of the comparisons, StarCraft was not initially a 40K game, but there was some inspiration certainly. Um, but he yeah, I think because they hired Andy Chambers was likely why they managed to snag him, because
Mm.
they wrote codexes together. Um, yeah, he was mostly well known for 40K. Even looking through, that's most of his work. I Mengsk was kind of a offshoot. The only thing I did a bit of research on his StarCraft like
Mhm.
ideas before this, and he really wants to do another book. It'll be but it's going to be unclear whether that's going to happen in the future, because yeah, we aren't getting much in the way of books.
Yeah, we're not getting much in the way of anything nowadays. Sad face.
Oh, here's an intro. Now he works for League of Legends, which also might
Oh
complicate things
yes.
as their
Oh
narrative designer. I didn't know that. Okay.
yes, he's been picked up by Riot Games. So press F for SC. If you're pressing
We still
S,
got it. Yeah, we got a good amount before the cancellation. It's like anything else. If the game returns, the books will return, and
mm,
short stories will return.
hopefully we will get something more. Maybe CEO changes and they decide, hey, let's do a little something. In the meantime, yeah, we'll be we had a good run, all things considered. But it's not over just yet. People like you and me are, for reasons or another, still here.
That's true.
Alright. I think that concludes the overview. Big F until, by the way, Dan Garbage says Big F until Bobby, I actually can't pronounce his name, Kotick, gets hit by a bus. Well, I wouldn't wish physical violence, but perhaps his resignation and would be in order. Okay, but no matter, no matter. Alright, so that kind of concludes the overview. Alright, next let's go through our main character. So I prepared this specifically. Alright, so we are here mostly to go through the main characters, and as implied by the name, the main character is the Mengsk family and Octorus Mengsk, who I have up on the screen from the Starcraft 2 engine with his unusually long thumb. So,
Yeah.
alright, so you mentioned that you have a lot of strong opinions about how this book specifically dealt with the character. And this is actually
Yeah.
quite interesting
Oh,
because he was introduced in StarCraft 1 kind of randomly, wasn't he?
no, he was pretty tied in. In fact, most of the story pulls from the StarCraft manual, which
Hmm.
that came with the game, that set up the Angus, the destruction of Core Hall, his time as a prospector.
Oh yeah.
And so they had a whole like bio for him. And one of the impressive things is, with a lot of time, the transition, especially with this first manual,
Mhm.
into like a fully fledged backstory is very rocky. There's a lot of contradictions, but this one managed to do it really smoothly, like hit every beat the manual really did. The assassination, which we'll get into.
Ooh, yes.
Um, and another thing, which I'm going to bring up a lot, the first published work that wasn't a short story was an e-novella named Uprising, which dealt with the nuking of Core Hall and the foundation of the Sons of Core Hall and him meeting Kerrigan. And that slotted in, like, that slots in his military, like, that mentioned his military service, which they also get into. That goes into a lot, like his Emojin connection. So they managed to really, they took in everything and really wove it together particularly well, while still maintaining, like, the fact that this is not a good person. There's a humanity to him, but there's a humanity in his evil. It's a very logical kind of evil. Something you would see in real life. Like, you always see a good reason, and it might even seem like something that's going to help you as a person, but in the end, it is something that will serve him. He just talked you into doing it because he's so charismatic, so tactical. So yeah, he's got a mind that thinks around you and makes you think you're doing something that's in the best interest of both of you, but really it's just him.
That, you make a very good point, because I'm just thinking back again. I had not read Uprising. I still haven't, honestly, and I've read on the screen right now. I can tell it's a very old book by the cover art. But when you've got yes, go ahead.
Oh, no, I was just saying, yeah, it's the first thing they ever made, really. It had some controversial decisions, and it was very rough, but it's enjoyable. It's not... A lot of the early StarCraft stuff is a little rough. They only hit their stride around this time, actually. Around the time of I Mengsk.
That's very true. I'm just thinking of the first few Broodwar levels, and I only played Broodwar after StarCraft 2. I'm like, the first few levels are kind of best, but of course at the time, this is the first introduction to StarCraft, and coming back to the original Broodwar, you're absolutely right, because as I was playing through Broodwar, you and Jimmy and Kerrigan effectively used by Mengsk right up until Jimmy says, to hell with this. That's something very, very consistent.
Yeah, and this definitely ties into it and goes a little beyond it, which we'll get into when we hit some of the story beats. But
right, so, yeah, the bulk of the book does deal with Arcturus. It also deals with his grandfather, who I'm just going to call Grandpa Mengsk, Angus.
You mean, yeah, Arcturus' father, Valerian's grandfather.
Yes, Arcturus' grandfather, Arcturus' mother, Catherine, and his sister, Dorothy. Oh, by the way, Davik says, I remember Mengsk in Liberty's Crusade, one of the few SC2 books I've read. A little cheesy, but interesting.
Yeah, I can get into Liberty's Crusade. It is a very well-loved book, and I love the first third of it, and I really do not like the rest of it. But it has a pretty good interpretation of Mengsk. The Mengsk scenes are probably the good part of the latter half, but it does have some cheesy issues, especially when it rubs against the games a bit.
I'll be honest, that also kind of describes the StarCraft 2 campaign, especially the story.
Well, let's not get it.
That's
a different debate for another day.
Yes, that is. Vito says Big Papa Mengsk taught Octuri everything he knew about being evil. I don't think that's true.
I think, yeah, I mean, Angus is kind of... So, I assume we're getting to Angus
Okay,
now.
let's go into... Okay, since we're talking about characters, let's touch on... Because I couldn't find an image for Grandpa Mengsk. Let's talk about his family and his background. This is
So a fact on that, he was actually supposed to show up in StarCraft 2 as a portrait that you could click on when the Bucephalus was a clickable area, but they cut that, sadly, which would have been... It's a shame, because I really would have liked to see him.
Yeah.
But yeah. So Angus is kind of the ideal of what Arcturus wanted to kind of became, and the ideal of what everyone thought he was, in that he's an influential figure, a member of one of the old families who had Core Hall's best interests at heart, but who was rebelling against the Confederacy. And his goals was, and even comes off like, he did not want power. He just wanted Core Hall to be free from the corruption of the way the Confederacy's abuses were getting, which we can also get into in world building.
Yep. Wasting money on the courthouse.
Yeah. But Arcturus, the idea of him is he's everything Arcturus doesn't want to be. Just a kind of troublemaker, and no one particularly... People either love him or hate him. Arcturus just kind of wants to live his life and be a prospector, and so he rebels against his dad. And that's a common theme through the book, is rebelling against something and then becoming that exact thing that you wanted to avoid.
Yeah, there's a quote in the book somewhere towards the end. Oh, what am I doing? I'm not gonna find it. Which just says that I become everything my father wanted to be and more. But that's also kind of like, again, this is October saying it, but that's also kind of not true, because everything I got from the book is that Angus. Again, I couldn't tell whether Angus specifically was genuinely like a freedom fighter, or whether he wanted to, just overturn the old established order. Maybe I've been with October a bit too long, but it didn't come off as single-mindedly egotistical as October, at least the way Angus portrays himself.
So yeah, and that's definitely true. And another theme of the book is kind of this comes off too, where Arcturus definitely misinterprets in his own way for his own selfish ego a lot of situations. There's a scene where he talks to his bodyguard when storming out of his house, where his bodyguard's like, "Hey, you need to basically make amends with your family before you make a clean break." And he takes that for his own life as, "Oh, I just need to make a completely not talk to this girl I've been courting and just had sex with." And we'll get that with Valerian, but he just internalizes completely the wrong idea in a lot of things. And for his father, I feel he believes that his goal was, I'm going to tear down the Confederacy, when really all he wanted was, I just want them to leave Core Hall alone. That's it. That's all I want.
That's definitely a true point. Let me switch back to the Twitch chat for our viewer Davik, who says that so what you're saying is October's story revolves around being a rebellious teenager at heart.
Yeah, I mean, it actually kind of does if you get down to it. It's more like the thing you rebel from, you eventually end up becoming, but with your own twist to the mistakes. There's even a quote at the end where they kind of spell it out of like, yeah, you're gonna Arcturus tells his son, you're gonna commit you're gonna make all the same mistakes I did and more, but you're gonna make them in your own way.
Oh yes, that's one of the better. That's actually a lot of great lines in the book. Oh, Vito says, "Congratulations, you played yourself." Don't we all? Especially when playing Starcraft. Too many letter games.
Yeah.
All right. So, I mean, that's a lot of great stuff about his father, and I do agree. There are a lot of interesting points because he I mean, we'll get into that. He does lose them, and then Core Hall does get exterminatus, to use the 40k term. Alright, but let's also talk about the other half, which is his mother and his sister. I feel really bad for his mom, actually.
Juliana's story is incredibly tragic.
Catherine.
The what? Oh, his mother. I'm sorry, I thought you were talking about Valerian's mother. Oh, yeah. Catherine and Dorothy are kind of the positive forces in his life, and kind of the one thing. So a lot of the story, you can tell Arcturus is using other people to for his own goals, but Catherine and Dot are probably the two only people in his life that he has a genuine affection, like non-selfish affection for. He actually really loves them because they're his family.
Dorothy especially.
Yeah, but he loves Catherine too. Like, I mean, that it actually does really hurt him when he does this whole storming out of the academy to show, I'm joining the armed forces.
Yeah.
And yeah, so they kind of serve as like a state, like the one thing, and it comes down when they finally do get assassinated, spoilers, by the Confederacy because of his father, basically. That is the one thing that hurts him. And his reaction to that is very much, it isn't even, there's a hurt for losing them, but there's also how dare that the Confederacy hurt me in this way, less than what they took from me. There's still a selfishness to it, even if it is a genuine care for losing those people.
It's true. I got that when I read it the second time. Davik says, I didn't know October had a sister. By the way, everybody who's listening, watching on YouTube, do know that that we're gonna go into full spoilers. I did not bring the Lore Expert on to not go into the into the good stuff. If you want the non-spoiler version, there's an overview I did. If not, just pick up the book on Amazon. Go ahead, pause the video, read it, and come back. I've done that once.
It's a bit of a thick book.
Is it though?
Actually, not really.
Not really. Like, it looks thick, but the font is pretty big.
Oh well, you've got the
the
Legends one increased the size of it. The hand one is big for a hand or for a small book.
Yeah, it looks big, but the font is quite big. So
I never did a hardcover version, unfortunately.
It evens out. So All right. So yeah. So that I mean that's the thing. There are a lot of sweet scenes about Octorus here being, Big Brother, actually a somewhat caring person. I'm not so sure I got that from his mom, but that's mostly because he does a lot of asshole things to both his parents, more to his dad, but also his mom.
Yeah, it
Um,
definitely hurts him that he hurt his mom. You can tell
mm,
that. And when he does correspondence during the war, he said it's came to his mom. Like he resents his father, and you could
mm,
say that he wants to respect him, but I don't know if he necessarily loves him. But he
mm.
definitely like you can get a sense that he loves his mom and sister.
Definitely his mom and sister. I mean, that's the people. That's like the 30 people he writes to when he's in school. The 30 people he writes to when he's in the army, and
Oh
it's
yeah,
quite. It's I don't know. I think one of the saddest parts of the book. Again, spoiler alert, Davik. Yeah, if you want to pick
I
it
think
up.
at this point we can avoid this. Like they, hopefully they know.
Well, okay. They should have. Like one of the saddest parts is like he's actually describing about how happy they'll be that they've got a grandson, and then 5 pages later, oh, they're dead.
Yeah, that's the yeah. He was going to announce it, and was when he found out that the three ghosts assassinated his family, which actually then ties into Uprising. One of the ghosts, the one who decapitated Angus, was Sarah Kerrigan, which is a big
Yep.
point in yeah Uprising.
Yep. They don't have a ghost of the chance. The book said.
Yeah, there's
Well, that's yeah. That's really really unfortunate because I would really have loved to see. Oh, Niche SC2 says that. Oh, okay. The Twitch I said, damn, is that why he kept her close?
yeah. So
Let's
it's been a
touch briefly on that.
controversy. Yeah, the and this gets into Uprising, which I'm gonna probably hit a
Mm,
lot. Um, yeah, he reveals it to her, and that becomes a big thing of like, hey, I'm like, I understand that you did this. We both want to take down the Confederacy for the crimes they did or they committed against us. Um, so like, I forgive you. You should join me. And it's been controversial because everyone thought
mm,
that why he abandoned her to the Zerg was that when the game's kind of set up that it was more so her beginning to doubt his leadership and like doubt his brutality. But then one of the writers came out said, "Oh yeah, also the fact she killed his parents
mm.
contributed," which I don't like, but I can't argue with the writers.
That's
But
true. I imagine he was immensely satisfied that he left her to the Zerg. I don't know. I thought Octopus just didn't give a damn. I'm like, you're expendable. Okay, time's up. All right, see ya.
yeah,
Ha ha
it,
ha ha.
it
Threw
was
you out the window.
it tied in a little bit even at the time to his
Mm.
paranoia of ghosts, where he
Oh
definitely thought
yeah.
it because they killed his family, and he
Mm.
needed training to prevent them from being able to read his mind, which is a big plot point in the later books. Um, because they killed his parents, that's the one thing that just come in randomly and like just kill people. And this comes up a lot with the Spectre plot, which are ghosts that rebelled against Arcturus. Because he needs them because that's the only way he can hold on against the alien menace. But
Mm.
he doesn't trust them at all.
Yeah. How do you make a weapon that's effective enough that it could kill your enemies but not be turned against you? Which is the entire
Uh,
problem with assassins in general.
and Nish, the Narud didn't ever had a direct influence on Mengsk. I know a few people think that.
Mm.
At least none that's been confirmed yet. They're from what we know, their partnership it was purely they were both they were both doing their for their own interests.
Yeah, the rule was like, oh, I need this money in exchange. I'll give you a few weapons. Can you give me this money now? It's like, yeah, okay. The way Valerian ties into that is really interesting, but I think that's going to be way outside the scope of this video because we're still talking about teenage
Yeah.
Valerian mostly. So,
Oh yeah.
yeah,
Like no
yes.
Valerian types.
Character introduced in a bad manga. Are you talking about Tosh? That garbage?
There. I think because we touched on the specters. Yeah, Tosh.
Okay.
A few of them.
Okay.
There's a few.
Alright, so okay, so before we get too off track, alright, so let's go through the relatives and families since that seems to be okay. Then after that, okay, so the main characters, of course, the Mengsk family. So the next we have is Juliana Pasteur, which if you're looking at the screen right, it says paramour. It does not say wife. It doesn't even say partner. and then
Yeah,
Valerian Meg's son. So Juliana, well, they
yeah, that,
met through the most unusual circumstances. I'll say that.
yeah. So they met because they're so Angus was funding a rebellion on Korhal, and there's the nation of the Umojan Protectorate because there's three nations of the sector based on the supercarriers they came out of,
Yep.
and Umoja is the small science nation, which has no like it has a lot of technology, a lot decent amount of resources, but no. It does the weakest military might of the three of them. So the only way it could really maintain itself is through basically subterfuge and proxy wars because
They've
it has a
got
very strong intelligence
they've
network.
got the whitest and the
Um,
bluest skin set.
yeah, and they gave him the white. I so their initial color in StarCraft 1 was supposed to be aqua, like the teal color,
Okay.
but I guess they kind of used that as blue. I don't know, and they made him
Yeah.
white, which is supposed to be the UED color, but that's
Yeah.
get into that later.
I do have the skin set up on the screen just to have a visual representation of their military forces. I know in lore they're supposed to be more technologically advanced but smaller, kind of like the Protoss of Terran, if you will.
Yeah,
But yeah, they.
I mean, there's a lot of Protoss parallels, but they're the weakest of the three nations. But yeah. So getting back to Juliana, they're basically funding. She's from the nation of the Emojin Protectorate, and they're funding Mengsk's revolt to try to keep the Confederacy on its toes, or providing with weapons. And during a visit, they meet. And also during an like when the Confederacy hires a corporate hit squad to try to get rid of them, is the night they come together, basically,
Yeah, basically
trying to
during a
avoid.
firefight.
Yeah. And that portrait actually of Julian actually appears in StarCraft 2, just in the background, but it's always semi interesting to me because she never really had a deep connection with the Mengsk family, and I always because it only shows up in Valerian scenes, I always imagined it was just something Valerian himself commissioned. But
That's probable. I doubt Arcturus would have bothered. Honestly,
yeah,
even
because
though
she's
he had.
also not a Mengsk, because she constantly gets mistaken as a Mengsk's wife, and that she
That is not
was
true.
literally someone he hit and quit. And the big theme of her is basically she's someone who fell for the heroic image of Arcturus.
She.
All and she gives up her life, especially when she has a son, hoping to like make a family with him when he
Yeah.
comes back.
Okay.
And that ends up not working out particularly well.
No, it
They
doesn't. I mean, to skip slightly ahead to the more interesting part of the book, which is that yeah, I get that she gives up her life to take care of her son. That's a very noble thing to do. But the way that she tied it together with our protagonist Arcturus, I'm like, lady, you've made a huge mistake.
I mean, it was the idea. It was the idea that Arcturus, like, ties into the fact Arcturus really had that influence on people. Like, he was charismatic. People believed that he was strong, had a good heart, had good intentions, just because of his charisma. And because of that, like, she believed, like, oh, I can take care of his son. If once the war is done, I can. Well, it's unclear whether she wanted him to be contacted or not, because she told her father not to.
By, by the way, okay, so Davik says that he thought during Heart of the Swamp that the emojis were UED because they were all white.
That's
Uh,
a lot of people thought that because also they fill kind of the same motif of a technologically advanced. The UD are supposed to be, and the Broodwar didn't present this well. They're supposed to be 300 years ahead of the Sector Terrans.
only
The
300.
Sector Terrans were sent over and had a hard reset when they got founded. They had to basically relearn everything with the basics of their civilization.
Yeah.
But UED, because of gameplay limitations and really other things, just made them regular Terrans with some advanced tech like medics. And what
I
they brought in did revolutionize the sector, but there's always excuses as to why. All of them have changed. No one particularly knows, but we'll see possibly if they bring them back. I
I
don't know, they might.
I always love that idea. Um, I mean, I remember reading, well, honestly, on your wiki, which is that they left their big guns back at home, which kind of makes sense that you don't want to bring like overtly advanced tech. Would you really want to bring your thermonuclear bombs, your hyper
Well,
weapons on like an expedition?
if I'll get into the UED. If we go down this road, I will take the entire episode to talk about the UED. So we should cut it
Okay,
off here,
okay.
I think.
By the way, and also for the Twitch chat, is that Space Jada? I'm gonna say no. She doesn't even look like Jada. Although I spent too much time with the white hair Jada version, and
I don't see it.
I don't see it either.
I mean, and the interesting thing is they have a few designs that are taken from Warcraft. The Calavelisi decal on Tychus' armor is the
Mm.
default human female in Warcraft, but this one is pretty not. Yeah, it's pretty like it looks something closer to something out of Diablo than Warcraft. I would or than Jane, I would say, because it has that more kind of grounded style. Whereas
Dav-
StarCraft 2 also had a bit of a Warcraft style to it, but
Davik
yeah.
says, I wish SC2 did more with species interfactions like they did with Corp and some of the commanders. You and me both, man. You and me both.
Yeah.
Oh well,
Uh,
so yes, coming back to Juliana, anything else you'd like to add? I mean, there's a lot to talk about her actually.
Yeah. One of the things I like about her arc is so Arcturus sent like after his family's assassinated, he
Mm-hmm.
completely recognizes that the Confederacy is going to kill them next.
Mm.
Like there's no doubt of that. The second they discover that he has a son, they're going to use it as leverage. Um, because
Mm-hmm.
Core Hall was supposed to be an example. So he sends them away, and they get sent from base to base to try to basically stay ahead of the assassins.
Yep.
And during that time, she gets ill. She gets a cancer, and slowly dies. And Arcturus does send doctors and everything else to try to help her,
He never shows up
but
though.
he doesn't show up till many years later.
Yeah.
And logically, that makes sense. Like he's
Mm.
running a revolution. You don't want him to he doesn't want to put the heat on them. Basically, he's sending them around so they live. But to Valerian, that breeds resentment, and we'll get more into Valerian's idealization of his father
Uh-huh.
versus
He's like,
Arcturus's.
where the hell were you? And then
Yeah,
Octos is like, I was back going.
but it's the evil that it's an evil that's kind of the root of it.
Uh-huh.
Arcturus's actual motivations were probably very selfish, but in the end, you can see they seem reasonable, and they probably
Mm.
are reasonable. Like that's kind of the thing. Valerian even has to admit that a lot of it is the emotions of seeing his mother slowly die while his dad essentially does nothing from the distance. But
Yeah.
and
I mean, Octos even says that, well, if I showed up, nothing would have happened.
yeah, how would this have changed anything?
Hmm. But that's also the dangerous thing, which is that he's found ways to justify all of his actions in a hyper logical, ultra politician way. That I'll still okay. There's still some hope beyond this, but actually, no. If you want hope, this Zugling has something to
Yeah,
say about that.
some of her last words are, "Please do not become like your father. Like, don't get sucked into what he
Mm-hmm.
wants to warp you into."
She finally saw
And I
that.
think that definitely set up some of the arcs from later, especially Heart of the Swarm, Legacy of the Void, with his own
Mm.
rebellion, which I hope we get expanded. Flashpoint more so goes into that, but book for another time.
Should have done to Juliana what he did to Kerrigan. Maybe, but she was honestly dead by then.
Kind of did, honestly. I mean, you could actually, I didn't even think of that parallel. But
Yeah,
yeah,
it's not
the
that far off.
abandonment certainly is there.
Alright, so, well, the one key point that she has to the whole story is that she is the paramount and she is the mother to his son, which then sets up one of the. Where
Yeah.
is he? Where did
Oh,
I
and
put
that
that? Here he
actually
is.
one point I did want to bring up
Sure, sure.
with her is the Minx courts her, and it's a long time court because they're just in the wrong place at the wrong time, and
Getting
then they
shot at.
finally like sleep with each other, and my favorite part is they go out of the way to justify why he didn't use a condom, which I still find hilarious. But anyway, when he's out, he like leaves and realize because to him it was a conquest. It
Yep.
was basically a like yeah a he worked really hard to conquer something, then he finally got it. So afterwards, he just kind of like I don't actually care about her.
Yep.
This is boring to me now. But there's a moment, and it's not an immediate leaving. There's a moment of guilt up until he completely misinterprets an advice from his bodyguard of like, you got to make
Mr.
a clean
Fields.
break. Yeah. Um, and after that,
Mm-hmm.
he's like, oh yes, clearly that means I just need to never talk to her again. So that's how that ends. it's a very selfish thing, but he's internalized the idea of like, oh, it's good for her that because I don't really care. I'm just gonna leave.
Twitch chat, he's not joking. I read that, I'm like, and his characterization is exactly what I got when I read that book. How many paragraphs are we talking about? Twitch chat asked.
So yeah, so on the condom section, literally to justify it, there's when they're on vacation, there's basically a shooting from anti-Confederate terrorists because Menk's in the armed forces at that point, and he fends a bunch of them off. And they talk about, oh, in the heat of the moment, we made some mistakes of forgetting things because we were so caught up in just the afterglow of the battle.
Yeah, that is honestly the first.
The actual they only mention Blizzard. Starcraft is the only Blizzard franchise where people are allowed to have sex, but they never go into detail on it.
Yeah, by the way, for the record, that was like 7 or 8 lines long. There's a lot longer about him leaving and the guilt behind that, which is honestly more interesting. If you're reading the Legends version, it's on page 216.
Oh, I've got this.
Soon they would be forced to part once more, but for tonight, Arcturus and Juliana sought to purge thoughts of their own mortality by affirming their life and humanity in the most primal way possible. And then we move on to chapter 10. Okay, I'm glad we got that out of our system, I hope. High on victory, they say. Well, that got quite the reaction. But okay, so basically that happens. Little Valerian is born, and then he doesn't see his dad for 7 years, thanks to his mom.
So Valerian's interesting because his. Oh, you do if you want to do the introduction. Sorry.
No. You go ahead. I was just ending that sentence with what the actual, because even Juliana's explanation made absolutely no sense. But yeah, go ahead.
It made sense in a way in regards to basically Arcturus stopped talking. Like he made it clear he wanted a clean break, and then the guild wars break out, and Arcturus is called into service, and she's got this deep fear that if he gets the surprise note, surprise, you got a son, that it's going to get him killed on the battlefield, which isn't, you can argue, isn't the best reasoning, but I feel like it's a real thing that'll go through someone's head, especially someone maybe trying to avoid confronting that someone who, I mean, you saw his reaction. He obviously was not happy to know he has a kid.
No, I interpreted that differently, which is that how dare you withhold information from me that I should know, as opposed to why did you let me see my son?
So he says that too, but also he goes through the emotional space, and there's a lot of justifications he makes. That was one of them, like, you just sprung the sun on me. Another one is, oh my god, what do? I have a son I didn't know about. It's basically there's the shock of surprise, and there's a lot of his own justifications he tries to bring out. But anyway, so Valerian is kind of the opposite of Arcturus in that, whereas Arcturus rebelled against his father, Valerian idolized him. Yeah, he was raised on stories. My dad's a big war hero, and he's gonna beat all the baddies. He's this big hero, and then he meets him, and Valerian's raised in the Emojin way, which is a little more peaceful, more science-based. He has a big interest in aliens, which gets factored into the games, though aliens hadn't been discovered yet.
That's actually a big deal. I want to get into that in the world building, but Valerian first.
Yeah. And Arcturus sees this, and Arcturus is someone who's done more combat. He's very physical. He's someone who believes that you need to basically be strong or the universe is going to eat you up, especially in Starcraft. And he calls him, when he thinks Valerian's not hearing, a bookish, effeminate weakling. And that just, that shatters his image of, I am not good enough for my dad. So the next few years are just him working to try to be something that his dad can actually be proud of, in spite of the fact that it's not the direction he particularly wants to take himself. But yeah, it's kind of the opposite story, because in the end he does realize, oh god, my dad's kind of not a great person.
I have accepted that my father is beyond redemption.
Yeah, and that gets into other weirdness with, but that's for the Flashpoint episode too.
Mm.
But yes, there's a lot of build up to why Valerian is very skeptical of the father who literally walks into his life and goes, "You're kind of a bad son. I want to make you better." And in the end, he does like say, "Hey, I am proud of you," but you
Hmm.
always get the impression that's just because he changed to the image he wanted, a more stronger, more intelligent, more tactical.
And
Um, you never get it because I'm proud of you because you're my son. It's like, yeah, you improved yourself.
the other thing that I got, especially only a second read through, is that you don't know when Octorus says "I'm proud of you" whether he's even telling the truth.
I I think in this case he is,
Mm.
but not in. It's again, it's not a I love my son proud. It's you'll be a good heir in the future
Oh yeah,
proud.
there's that. Like
I,
that's the
I,
thing because it's mentioned that he wants an heir, but he doesn't really care about the rest of it. He just wants a successor. He wants to continue the
yeah,
Mengsk dynasty.
yeah.
And
That's
that's.
as the book brings up, the glory of the Mengsk dynasty
Mm,
often then gets used often by Arcturus to say, yeah, for my own good.
so you're not
Yeah,
a total
yeah.
embarrassment anymore. Good job, Valerian. Ivory Tower intellectual, coastal elite. Octurus, real red-blooded Terran.
Basically, yeah, it's two different ideologies, and it comes down to the two different upbringings: the Confederacy versus the
Mm.
Emojin like softness. Because yeah, Valerian is a mix of that kind of more peaceful Emojin science-based ideology, and Arcturus is you got to do everything you can to win.
Yeah, I mean, it's a lot of things also because Octurus grew up with his father, there all the time, being a quote unquote troublemaker, trying to mold him. Valerian had literally nothing for 7 years.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, Alan wasn't poor. He had his father's
Oh,
wealth, basically.
Octurus just wasn't there because Octurus had no
Oh yeah,
idea. So in terms
yeah.
of like,
Alan yeah, his grandfather served as the surrogate father, but yeah, all he had was his ideals of his dad. He didn't never actually had his dad.
yeah, so that's really an interesting point that they goes to about the Meg's family, how it goes on. I think I'll okay, so this is a very beautiful segue because I do want to touch upon the minor characters, and you were talking about his other grandfather, Alan.
Oh, Alan Pasteur, yeah. So he's actually in it, and to bring up the tiny bits that it connects, he was a character introduced in Uprising as kind of the liaison Arcturus had with the Emojin Protectorate, who actually is the person who gives him the Hyperion, the flagship that Raynor later steals.
Oh.
So that's the way he's introduced. But yeah, there's a lot of aminosity. Alan's kind of the anchor. He's the diplomat that initially helps Arcturus's
Mm,
father, Angus. Then he helps Arcturus when the rebellion gets started, because after
mm,
Angus dies, Arcturus decides I'm going to take up the mantle and keep this rebellion going, for his own personal revenge. But yeah, so he's kind of the
mm.
reverse Arcturus. He's less confrontational, but he's a caring. Like he loves Valerian. He loves his grandson,
He actually loves his
and
family.
yeah, and he cares about his family, but he doesn't want to force Julian or even Valerian down a path. He wants them
Mm.
to kind of pick for themselves.
That
So that just kind of leads to Arcturus kind of stamping in, though that when we get to world building, I'll get more into Emojin
sure.
Dominion relations.
Yeah, I
So
was
I've
just
written a
about to
lot
say
on that.
that doesn't seem to be the Emojin way of things, but we'll get to that in world building.
So
Uh,
so Dravlik, quick on the Hyperion. It's gone through so many hands. It was a Confederate ship that
mm.
flew into Emojin space. The Emojins captured it, refitted it, gave it to Arcturus. Arcturus used it, then Jim steals it, and then it goes back to the Dominion. So it's bounced around to virtually every Terran power except the Kelmorians, because no one
And
likes the Kelmorians.
it's now in co-op.
Yeah, and now it's now. Yeah, funnily enough, Horner should have it, but I mean, Horner was added much before Raynor, so
Yeah. I remember in the early days of co-op, again, this is just a side segment because I always love it when the game models eventually show up in game. I
Mhm.
remember that Vader used to say like Matt would imply that Matt was on the Hyperion
Oh,
until I don't know if they
yeah.
cut those voice lines or anything.
So I think you're right. So the voice lines come from Heroes of the Storm. But what happened in co-op was So it started out when you summon the Hyperion, like
Mm.
Raynor showed up as usual, and then with a rework, they made it Matt Horner, the version from the Friends Like These mission from Heart of the Swarm.
Mm-hmm.
But then Matt got added, and actually even people were saying, "Oh, they can't add Matt because he's on the Hyperion." And then they did the logical thing that everyone knew they would, which was Matt Horner. They just turned it back to Raynor and made Matt Horner his own commander. So he used to be the portrait and voice lines of the Hyperion before they changed it.
Yeah, they
But to
just
light
like.
him up, Matt. Oh,
Well, actually, if you actually just think about it, Corp, there's nothing that can't say that he's also a commander because he doesn't need to physically show up on the battlefield and be on the Hyperion.
yeah, I mean, it's a small change, but co-op's done a lot of small changes like that too. So,
Well, Davik says
yeah,
it's
he
called the
was actually
Cthulhu bicycle. What about that period?
he was
That's a
supposed to be
wonderful life.
Matt was supposed to be one of the earlier commanders, and then they realized they couldn't make an interesting kit for him, so he got pushed really far back.
I mean, the most interesting thing about his kid is still his quote-unquote wife. Anyway, these are characters for another day. They don't show up in I Mengsk, so I gotta cap it before we go way off tangent.
Yep.
Alright, so as a final point about Alan, it's implied that he used to be an alcoholic.
Yep. Yep, they mention it very briefly when Angus is like, "Oh, come on, just one beer." He's like, "There's no one beer for me."
Not anymore. Yeah, that's actually a really interesting point.
It's a small little bit of character development. It doesn't ever really come up, but it's a nice little bit of world building.
Yeah. All right. So there's all right. So to talk about, let's say, the minor, the secondary characters, tangent away. You say no. We only have a limited amount of time. So so minor characters of this book. Some of them which I love. Um, okay, let's start with the security man that we've talked about a few times.
Feld, yeah.
Uh,
It should be, what's the first name again?
Can't
Acton Feld. ECTON.
oh, it doesn't matter. There's no portrait for him anyway.
ECHDON. So he's another again. So kind of like Alan, he was also a character introduced in Uprising, and he's someone. His literal role in that book is standing on the surface of Core Hall, like to announce, "Oh, the Confederates are retreating," and then the planet gets nuked. So that's how he dies, and they bring that up in this book very briefly that he was on the surface when that happened. But he's the security and kind of the the sensible one that tries to give sagely advice to a lot to Angus and Arcturus.
It's kind of fitting it's kind of fitting that the one guy that Arcturus genuinely listens to is basically a hired killer.
Well, he's not a hired killer. He's just a security guy. He could have taken other jobs, which is, yeah, he mentions the job on Brontes, which is a fun reference, but that's so he tries to be kind of this stable force of reason, especially with Angus, who's very carefree with a lot of his antics against the Confederacy. Like, hey,
that is true.
This will get you assassinated if you just keep flaunting yourself. But yeah, his scenes are minor, but he's got a strong presence. I like him a lot.
I also like his scenes a lot, and the way that he's one of the few people that control Arcturus and get away with it, which is really really interesting. He's also kind of a badass, you know. He takes shots and he keeps going, and he does his best to keep the family safe. He
has a genuine belief in the sector or the keeping Mengsk's revolution and keeping that alive.
He's kind of
there is a love for wanting to free Core Hall in him.
Yeah, he doesn't. He's not selfish like a lot of the people that Arcturus would later surround himself with. Hi Hero, thanks for tuning in as well. I just realized Acton, if I'm pronouncing it, was kind of like the surrogate older brother for Arcturus, the one that he would actually listen to.
It's almost the father figure he ended up with rather than the one because he had a strong authoritarian father who wanted him the best for him, but might have been a little overbearing. But Acton kind of was the sagely one who Arcturus would mostly listen to. He of course catches him sneaking into the family Vista in a bit of misdirection at the beginning, because those who know the lore think that it's the ghost coming in to assassinate Angus, but then you find out, oh, it's just teenage Arcturus.
And then he accidentally saves the day. I love that segment in the book. Like it went from 0 to 100 real quick in a completely believable way.
Yeah, and it factors in a lot to the fact that at that point they wanted Angus dead, and at this point they bring up it was the other Core Hall senator who sent them, but the Confederacy was trying to do it in the least overt way possible, but things just gradually escalate as it becomes clear that the Confederacy is losing one of their prime worlds.
One of their jewels in their crown, or the jewel in the crown, as I think Angus would put it later.
Yeah. I mean, it was the one. It was Tarsonis was kind of a urban disaster. They had a lot of outer colonies that weren't great, but Core Hall was kind of showing hey, this is a vibrant, well-functioning, terraformed, people are generally wealthy world.
Wouldn't that be?
See, you don't want to leave the Confederacy.
Wouldn't that be the equivalent of Washington nuking New York?
Maybe. I'm trying to think of a better equivalent, but yeah, it's essentially cutting off one of your major cities. And the fallout of that, yeah, that gets definitely explored.
Yeah, well, unfortunately, he was he was killed by a nuke, unfortunately, and I mean,
his introduction to the canon was just being the guy that gets killed by nukes.
And unfortunately, it's also sad because when Arcturus talks about him later to Valerian, he's like, he describes Acton as a good man that you should have met, and he would have been a great guy, but he got nuked.
Yep. Oh. No, that was There was the guiding force in Arcturus's life, so he was hoping Valerian would have him too.
Well, speaking
though again.
Oh yes, go ahead. Then I'll wrap up that.
Oh, but again with Acton, his advice was essentially. I keep bringing up the one moment he had with Arcturus where he tells you need to make a clean break with your family. Don't leave loose ends that you're going to regret later in life because you don't know how long you're going to be here. And he just gets the wrong message from that of, yeah, if I just cut everyone off, that's a clean break. So
that happens, yes, although that's entirely on Mengsk.
Yeah, it's taking his advice and yes, this is very sagely advice. I'm going to completely misinterpret it in my own way.
It's like the moment in Breaking Bad when I don't know if you saw that. It's that Mike is like, "Oh, don't do a half measure, then Walt just goes and kills everyone." Then Mike is like, "Funny how that turned out." All right, but okay. So coming back to sagely advice, my favorite minor character of the entire series is Valerian's sagely mentor Miyamoto.
Oh yeah, you had mentioned you like Miyamoto.
Oh, I love Miyamoto.
He's interesting because to me, the implications of him, because he takes a lot from the old Earth Asian culture. He's kind of one of the few trying to maintain the old martial arts, what they call the Book of Virtues, which I think someone actually looked into it, and it was the oh god, what was it? It was an old Japanese treatise on war. But because the data was wiped on the supercarriers, there's a lot of incomplete information, so they basically made up a name for it.
Which was convenient for Graham McNeil and Blizzard.
Book of the Five Rings. That's what it actually was in real life.
Again, one reason I love Miyamoto is because I've attempted to read the Book of Five Rings after getting a recommendation from Neuro. And I like it because it really brings a lot of that wisdom, a lot of those ideas. He's got a lot of great lines.
He's a traditional warrior. He wants you to fight with honor, fight for someone. And he's, in the end, he was hired he trained Arcturus in the academy, and he was hired to train Valerian.
That's one point.
And Arcturus wanted him to make him Valerian a better fighter. I just want him to be able to stab someone better. Whereas Miyamoto is trying to impart actual wisdom of hey, you need to fight for the right reasons.
Fight
you
with
can't.
Honor.
Yeah. Well, the big moment is hey, what I want you to be a man of he says, I want you to be a man of honor. And Valerian goes, like your father? Like my father? And he says, no, nothing like your father.
Not like your father. Just leaves it at that since Davik says, oh boy, I didn't know SE had a hysterical, wise old man in it. But I guess I shouldn't be surprised since Tosh exists.
Yeah, I mean, there's a lot of nationality. Oh, God, yeah, Tosh is another topic. They have a planet that's space 80. I wish they would diversify, like explore that a bit more of the
How do you have this Jamaican
semi-cultures
dude
and
here?
mixes they have, but because of incomplete information. And this
Hmm.
kind of explored it. But yeah, this is the Asian old man.
It is, it is. I mean, I loved it because Miyamoto is from Miyamoto Musashi, who's one of the great sword fighters. So I love that parallel.
Hmm.
The way he's portrayed really made it feel as if it was the legendary Miyamoto Musashi who's training Valerian. And I also like the link, as you correctly mentioned, that Master Miyamoto taught both Arcturus and Valerian. So there is a sage figure that ties the two characters together until he gets cut down by, and I'm gonna segue this. He gets cut down by none other than Arcturus's superior officer.
Yeah, Angelina. Yeah, and she's kind of the roots of the old Confederacy in this book. Emilian, that's what it is. I can never
Hmm.
pronounce it. Um, but yeah, she's the one who recruits Arcturus and the Confederate Marines, and that's an interesting bit because there's a long chain of why that was added in his service in the Marine Corps. Um, but yeah, so she's the one that recruits him, and she's kind of the standard Marine. She doesn't ask questions, and she's
Hmm.
carrying out the will of the Confederacy. She wants to when she gets ordered to claim a mining like prospecting site, she doesn't care. She goes and takes it. Whereas Arcturus looks into this and goes, "Wait, this was someone's actual site. They had all the
Yeah,
things in order."
like
Um,
I checked out. I'm like, but ma'am, the paperwork checks out. And she's like, don't question it. Like, to
yeah,
hell with your
basically, like
paperwork.
you just don't be a troublemaker, don't question it. She exemplifies that Confederate Marine of like we have overwhelming force, we can do what we want,
She sounds
and she
like the
thrived
Marines
under
I
that.
play with, except she's a lady.
Yeah,
Like, go and attack that
but
siege tank.
she's also she serves as a relic of the old Confederacy
Mm.
when Arcturus eventually topples it and takes over because she
And
joins what's the resistance forces and and the end of the book tries to assassinate him, which ties into
I mean,
the
her.
UED invasion.
I mean, what you're saying is very, very apt because she basically goes down with the Confederacy. She literally went down with the ship.
Well, and she brings up she has nothing else. There's no other life for her. That
That's
she
true.
was in the Confederate Marines. She was going to be there for life. Like she just basically wanted to get hers in the service and yeah, die eventually. But
Mm.
then Arcturus kind of ruins that by toppling the Confederacy.
Which is interesting because October said that yeah, somebody's attempting to call her, but they'll never be successful because that's just not her. And yeah, it dies on either by Octorus or Valerian's gun impaler, whatever it was. But she's a really interesting character to see because again, she was Octorus's superior officer. She basically convinced him to join the Marine Corps, and what a wonderful chain of events that would lead to.
Yeah. So that's always been a funny thing to me because initially that was never mentioned in the StarCraft 1 manual backstory for him.
Yeah.
But the games in NORAD 2 implies that Arcturus knew Duke somehow because they talk as if they were familiar. So
Hmm.
Uprising then mentioned a thing of, well, Arcturus was a captain in the Marine Corps, and that's where he had met Duke. And so that led to that entire section
Yeah.
that they added in this book.
Which is interesting because when I went through the when I played the campaign, it felt as if Duke might have just known of Octurus because well he is the rebel leader and as a general you should know about him and Duke was currently in deep Zerg infestation of a certain color, so I need your help. But yeah, it turned out that apparently they had some backstory together.
Uh,
Davik says that all families of Confederacy was something I wish Liberty's Crusade did more with.
so
Yeah,
if
the
you
old
want more on the old
families
families,
were. I,
yeah, the book Ghost Nova goes super deep into them.
okay,
And I Mengsk goes a bit into it too. I mean, the Mengsk family is one of the old families. Ghost family is just entirely world building and just a
I
mess of
see.
Terran culture.
I might take a look at that, but yeah, I read that. I read Heaven's Devils. I'm like, there's barely anything on the old families except for the sniper The sniper dude. I can't
Yeah,
remember his name offhand.
they Rick Kidd or Ark Bennett. Yeah,
Ah, yes.
they that goes pretty deep in as well. It does not much because the old families are always the force behind the war. They're interesting because they're technically not like they don't technically have a role in government. They're just really powerful business leaders, and there's an
Hmm.
elected Confederate government that just does whatever they say. Basically, they're the oligarchs or the unelected oligarchs that
Hmm.
control from behind the scenes.
I wonder if they do that through election funding. But anyway, but yeah, it's also mentioned that Duke is part of the old families, although
Yeah,
it's not really.
the Duke family is an old family.
Hmm. But
But yeah, they mention him being colonel in here, which is always a fun because Liberty's Crusade had him as colonel at the start of the game, which was a bit of a retcon. But
huh,
yeah, and it's never stated what, but it's always said that he because of his position he should be
higher.
in more power, but he had messed something up in the past, and no one quite knows yet what that is. But knowing Duke, it was probably something.
Yeah, which even Octorus made it clear, like, shouldn't you be higher up? And then Duke completely shuts him down out of anger as well as you can tell embarrassment, which is quite
Hmm.
well written little segment. Which is quite interesting because Duke was the first character, the first video game character that um appears in the game. There are other people like what you call it? Like Dominion Sector, which was an
Yeah,
interesting term. Like oh,
they're interesting. I always thought the name was incredibly on the nose, but yeah, they serve as kind of the first time Arcturus gets leadership, and
mm-hmm.
they just are like, "We'll follow you to the ends of the earth," even though Arcturus just kind of wants to survive the war. But he does care about them, which is something when we get into world building, I'll bring up because that leads
Sure,
to a
sure.
massive chain of events into why that ends up with the lore reason for the Widow Mine.
Yeah, you asked me to get like the Widowbite, and I pulled out the page. I'm like, the Widowbite? That
Yes,
thing?
no, that
Okay, okay.
there is a weird chain of events that starts in this book that leads to the
Alright,
Widow Mine.
I can see you're really excited to get to that. I think that's it for all of our key characters. There are a bunch of minor characters like the pro Confed Senator likes or whatever. There's um
Yeah,
the
the
principal of the
professor.
academy, which is
Oh
more
yeah.
funny than anything else. But yeah, anything else you want to add on for our character segment?
Looking through. No, that should be. I mean, there's my favorite, which is Samir Duran briefly appears in this, which means this is the one of two StarCraft books, in spite of being relatively grounded,
Hmm.
where a Zelnaga character appears.
Yeah, but I was wondering whether I should bring it up, but like his name appears once and he has like 5 lines.
Oh, yeah, it's just a small little thing, but
Yeah, that's a bit
I
of an
like
Easter
bringing it
egg.
up because this is a very political, like intricate,
Hmm.
very grounded story, and it's one of the few where Zelnaga shows up.
That's true, that's true. But in the book, again, there's nothing to mention that he's a Zondaga. He's just
No, yeah, but
planning
it's
some
just a
stuff.
funny comment.
Yeah, that's true, that's
There's
true.
nothing.
We'll probably get back into that because we have a section later that we're going to talk about how this ties into everything else. So we'll get to, alright. So let's go into world building, and I think I'll let you, if you don't mind, take the reins here because I think you've got a lot of things you want to talk about.
Um,
Where do you want to start for the world building side? Do you want to start with like I don't know, Cohort's culture, the Confederacy, Umoja, the
Yeah, so the
Kalmorians? I
biggest,
don't know. You tell
yeah,
me.
I can go into a lot of it. The biggest thing is I mentioned earlier. This goes through what is established in the manual very
Mm-hmm.
cleanly, and with uprising sprinkled in. But it does a very good job connecting with the media of the time.
Hmm.
In spite of the fact it's cast the widest net, it's if you're reading in timeline order, it's the first book you read aside from some short stories, and it's like stops after Starcraft or after Stark Broodwar ends, like years later.
Yep.
So there's a lot of ground to cover and a lot of touches on. Um, and the big thing it set up was core Hall culture, the fact that what it was like before the nuking and the rebuilding,
Which
old
Valerian asked.
capital.
Yeah, Valerian asked that directly. Like, what was it like to walk among the cities and the trees before it was all glassed?
Yep,
Which is a pretty sad
and
line.
yeah, Styerling, the old capital city before Arcturus rebuilds Augustgrad, which is named after his grandfather.
Hmm.
Um, it's the one of the few pieces of work that touches on the UED invasion very briefly because Blizzard for some reason doesn't mention it much. But it's also one of the biggest it shows the strongest connection between Umoja and Umojan culture in general. The more science, like peaceful, they're very technologically advanced. They try to they try not to lose life if they can help it. But because of that, they have to work underhanded to really.
Yeah, I mean
The
that.
only way they can defeat their enemies is by turning them against themselves. If there's a revolution in StarCraft, Umoja probably has sold them some guns at some point.
And a battle cruiser, apparently.
Yeah, I mean, they fund the Spectres, they fund Arcturus. They don't actually ever directly fund Raynor, but hints that they're involved. But
Well, they
um,
let Raider and Valerian crash on their couch in Heart of the Swamp.
well, that's true. Yeah, they help Valerian when he's on the run from his dad. But
Hmm.
yeah, this sets up this is where it's strongest, most shown, and its influence on Valerian as I want to understand this universe better. I don't think it's all like necessarily brutal. I think we can make it better, which is a very
Hmm.
Umojan ideology.
I want to
Um,
go and dig for aliens in my backyard, and
Yeah, and the emojis were introduced as like we love the Protoss, like we want to understand them so much, and they mostly dropped that, but that's still there in their love of
hmm.
science and wanting to understand alien technologies.
Yeah.
Um,
So as you do mention, we do get a little bit of Umoja. We go there like very very briefly, and I.
we go there. I mean, there's a decent section on them. It's not massive, but it's more than usual. I mean, we don't. It's the closest we
Yeah.
go anywhere else.
Okay, that's fair. We'll take what we can get, but it's mostly visiting a guy's house.
Yeah, but
Alan's
you get to see
house.
the world, and you get to see the wealth. Basically,
Hmm.
like it's not Core Hall, but as Juliana says, it's not Core Hall, but it's very similar in its
Yeah.
wealth and
The one thing
prosperity.
that stood out to me when visiting Umoja, I mean they mentioned a few landmarks where one of the super carriers crashed. Um,
Serango Canyon, yeah,
yeah, there's a giant canyon where that happened. The other
which
interesting
that's
thing, yes, go
but
ahead about the canyon.
oh no, I was going to say that that one was the one. There are two crashed on Umoja, and Serango Canyon was the one of this carrier that just directly crashed and killed everyone on board.
Kaboom.
But that's actually an old use map settings map, Serango Canyon from StarCraft One.
Oh.
So that was a bit of a reference to that. There's a few little
Hmm.
mentions of super old maps in this book.
As a Dark says, as a Protoss player, I approve of Umojan's Protoss fanboying. Oh well, we'll get into a little bit of that because I really want to talk about Tandador, but
Oh,
well
Tirador?
Tyranor, yes, well, but one planet, one faction at a time. Um,
Yeah.
yeah, but the other thing that really stood out when visiting Umoja was that the fact that they have robot servants in
hmm
Pasture's house, whereas it's implied in Core Hall that they just use people.
Yeah, so in the sector, and this gets brought up in the skin set, AI is really far behind. You see adjutants, but adjutants are literally like portions of them are wholesale
Mm-hmm.
copy from the AI that brought them to the sector because they don't quite understand how it works.
Mm-hmm.
But Umoja has kind of devoted itself more to understanding robotics and AI, and it's brought up in the skin set you brought up. It's brought up in the Raven that they've pushed it a little past the constraints of ethical AI to advance them. Um, so yeah, there's a bit of nod of that, and it's just kind of to reinforce that this is a more technologically advanced culture compared to kind of the grittiness of the sector, the
Mm-hmm.
Dominion and the Kelmorian Combine,
The
or Confederacy and the Kelmorian Combine at the time.
The height of sophistication, these ravens are equipped with little understood artificial intelligence that exceed anything that Dominion engineers would ever approve. And that's the Umojan Raven, which has a much better looking propulsion system, I gotta say.
Hi,
Yeah, so
hi,
they
Aradane. Sorry, chat.
yeah,
But
that's
yeah,
fine. Thanks
so
for taking care of our guest. Alright, so yeah, Umoja does have a lot of things, its culture. It's peaceful, which you only really appreciate once you read the beginning of the book. Before these
yeah,
Zerglings came about and started eating everything that Kerrigan would let them eat.
but
Um,
and this also serves as a bit of a catalyst because they help Arcturus and they hope he's going to become like a more kind leader to them. But it very quickly becomes apparent that Arcturus is really just as bad, if not worse, than the government he overthrew. He's brutal. He doesn't care for his
mhm.
citizens. He's just trying to seize power. And so at the end of the book, Arcturus visits Umoja to like announce, "Hey, I have a son named Valerian," because before he'd been in hiding,
Mm-hmm.
and that's when the Confederate assassins come in to try to kill him. And it's brought up at the end, and it's actually even brought up in later books
Mm-hmm.
that Arcturus is fairly certain that Umoja like turned a blind eye to that assassination to get him killed. And it's never actually said either way, which I do like.
Mm.
It's never confirmed whether Umoja had any culpability in letting the Confederate resistance forces through, because they go through all the details that they do to like
Yeah.
basically get through. But Arcturus believes it, and that leads to basically a long period of Cold War that you can see all through the comics and games
Oh
between the
yes.
Dominion and Umoja. They do everything they can to undermine Arcturus just as
Well,
much, if not more, than the Confederacy.
well, that's the thing, right? I mean, Arcturus knows full well that Umoja is gonna do whatever it needs to do to undermine the big dog at the time, and when he becomes the big dog, he's like, oh yeah, so that's what you're gonna do, huh? But,
Yeah,
but that's an interesting point. I think the assassination attempt was also on. They were okay with killing Valerian while they were at it, right?
yeah, and that's also why it might not. It's if it was probably wasn't Alan who
Mm.
ordered it or anything. Um,
Oh,
and again, they leave it very ambiguous because the Confederate resistance forces did like they got the codes that you get in the first
yeah.
campaign of or mission of Iron Fist. They got through the security. Like there was a process,
And
so it's unclear how much if they did turn a blind eye or. But
and
that ties into a bit to Mink's paranoia.
uh,
He definitely believes everyone's out to kill him, and a lot of people are. So
Carragher's made that very clear.
yeah, I ended up
Jimmy
killing him
too.
in the end.
Which is by the way kind of interesting because I would also just like to point out like what Subsourian is saying. It wasn't like two guys. It was a squad and a bunch of waves. Like it's I can't imagine it being easy to bring in like fighter jets to an assassination attempt.
Yeah,
Like the amount of
it's
logistics is just insane.
yeah. I mean, well, they had pretty considerable resources. Again, it was all ex-Confederate, but they had the access
Mm.
codes. They could just bring in a transport and a few wraiths. And they had the backing of the UED, which was at the time just steamrolling through the sector because it's Earth. They're very powerful in the setting.
And not to mention that the Cthulhu was just they had just finished Starcraft 1. They were a little tired at the time. Um,
Yeah, yeah.
yeah, so that's mostly Umoja. We do see a little bit here and there, which is interesting because it only occurred to me after I read the books like, oh wait, so the current Emperor of the Dominion, Pretty Boy Valerian over here, is half Umojan.
hmm
I guess that's a win for Umoja that they have kind of one of theirs on the throne.
So that when Nova Covert Ops came out, they did a brief propaganda campaign on social media with the Starcraft stuff to
Mm-hmm.
basically show the Defenders of Man propaganda against Valerian. And one of the things they brought up is, hey, Valerian's half Emojian, like he's half part of a foreign power. It's the equivalent of like if
Mm-hmm.
someone was like half, I don't know, like an American president, half Russian. I'm trying to think of a good example,
JFK.
but
They're accused of being Catholic, I remember.
yeah, something like that with an actual direct connection. But
Hmm.
they brought that up as like, can you actually trust him because he might have the work like the ideals of the Emojin at heart or the best interests of them.
Yeah, and
And it
he.
turns out in a decision I don't know where they're going with it with Umoja and the modern stuff, to be honest, but Umoja's really against Valerian and guarded, and some of it's for a good reason, but some of it gets a little ridiculous when it
Hmm.
becomes like, we're gonna hold blackmail on you.
That's the entire premise of the keep.
Yeah, that's Nova the Keep. It comes up a bit in Evolution. It comes up a bit in some other comics.
Yeah.
Basically, the state of Umoja. Something I would like explored a bit more, but
Every time you say I want it explored more, I'm just thinking about that blog post from not too long ago. I'm like, F in the chat.
of what the oh
That
of the
one.
canceling of StarCraft. Yeah,
Hmm.
hey, it'll come back. It always does. No good
Well,
franchise
hopefully.
dies that can be exploited.
Yeah, it's a good franchise. A lot of good lore which hasn't been explored, hasn't been properly talked about, which is one reason why I'm doing this. Um,
There's a lot to it. Of course, there's always more to explore. Just ask Warcraft about that. So,
Sometimes not for the best, according to the Warcraft people, but
well, sometimes not the best for Starcraft either, but I
uh,
still stick with it.
a guy on Reddit made it very clear about what happened in Diablo. So,
Yeah,
oh well.
and yeah, there's people who don't like the direction, and I
Okay,
Ariadne
well,
is a huge World of Warcraft
all
player,
right.
so
So,
yes.
that's Umoja. Where do you want to head off to next? Tarsonis, Core Hall, the outer
Tarsonis doesn't
sector.
really come up all that much. Coral we've kind of gone through. Um, there's a lot of minor planets they go through. They aren't really there to like. There's not really a culture to them. They're just more to show.
Hmm.
Oh, this is most of the sector. It's gritty. It's rough. Nobody likes it, but they're out there, and everyone's like hardworking, like
Hmm.
southern rednecks trying to make a living,
There's an
like
entire
Serona.
yeah, there's an entire section on like the whole prospector culture that's on the outer rim. They are
Because that's
make
what Arcturus really wanted to be.
Yeah, they're kind of
Mm.
making it like the old Wild West. Anyone can go out there and get your things, but oh, who knows what great dangers are out there? And it turns out it's these guys.
Yeah, it's They in the Caprulu sector. There's three big businesses. It's mining, or attacking mining operations, and defending mining operations.
Aren't
So
the
that's
last two the same thing?
the what?
Aren't the last two the same thing? Defending and
Yeah,
attacking mining operations.
yeah. I mean that's kind of it in the game too. But yeah, the Terrans of the sector are mostly there to exploit mineral wealth. That's why one of the nations is literally just a gigantic mineral company. So
Yep, Fuzzy Zugling did nothing wrong. No, no, it didn't. No,
yeah,
no, 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 no,
Carbot
no, no,
certainly is
no, no.
adorable.
Yeah, Adriana says I could easily derail this with WoW. Probably can. Well, we do get a little bit on the Calmorians, which I think you pointed out on Reddit. We get next to nothing about them outside of Heaven's Devils.
Yeah, that's the only time you get because for context, they're one of the three nations, and they
Mm.
had the biggest mineral wealth. So their corporate presence in terms of their like the mining guilds that exploited that
Mhm.
became really strong. And eventually, like their two biggest conglomerates, which were their main mining company and their main shipping company, combined and just basically bought out the government because they ran them
Mhm.
anyway. Um, but yeah, they show up in the games a few times, but their presence is so minimal, which is a shame because I feel like there's a lot of
Yeah.
um, room to explore like this corporate like the corporate culture. Co-op got a little bit of them. Heaven's Devils definitely was the deepest exploration. They should do them a bit in I Mengsk with the
Yeah.
Guild Wars, which was that one time the one time that the Kelmorians could stand up to the Confederacy but lost pretty brutally.
I don't know. They showed up for like 20 pages in a 500-page book. That's oh well, it's something, but um,
Yeah, I mean
yeah.
they're there.
The only time I
It's better than
remember
a lot.
them at all in StarCraft 2 is in that co-op mission where it's mentioned that the mining bots is um Calmorian tech that they tried to copy from the Emojins, and of course that did not go well. And
Well, that
that's
whole
it.
map is you're rescuing a Kelmorian mining operation.
How nice.
Deborah Green is one of the guild masters. They show up a bit in two, like the I'm sorry, the Hammer Securities are a Kelmorian security
Oh,
company. And actually the War Pigs were initially in the editor. They're called Kelmorian miners, which so there's a lot of hints there was going to be a bigger
hmm.
presence, and you can see them in little lore tidbits, but they never play a big presence.
They
They
never
show up in
have.
Broodwar once, and you steal 10,000 minerals from them. That's become a bit of a meme.
10,000 minerals, what a nice number. By the way, the Twitch chat says that yeah, they're agreeing. They're coming back to the point that Valerian and Edwin look alike, and how pretty when he cries. The same voice actor, and he does have an angry wolf uncle. Well,
Well,
one's an
that's
asshole,
true.
the other one has a sword. One
You want to ask
dies
about
in
what?
no, like one dies in glorious combat. The other one, Kerrigan comes and just stabs him. Yeah,
Well, that's true. Yeah.
I really
Well,
wish
both of
we.
them blow up. Both of them actually blow up in the same way, kind of.
That's
They
true.
both
That's
turn
true.
to dust.
And then you have an angry half-human lady taking the reins of the world, as it were,
Yeah.
with the help of a human ally.
Okay,
the
so
half human lady, both corrupted by greater powers that they no longer serve. I'm gonna stop on the panel so that
well,
we can go back to the Calmorians. Yeah, so it's really a pity that they kick off like, oh, the Guild Wars just started, and then the next chapter, the next page is, yeah, it's kind of over.
yeah, they couldn't go too deep in because, and there are a little bits.
Mm.
This is where, so there's one mention on the fate of what's it? Which one was it? I'll bring up Dominion section. I think it was Yarsi.
I thought Yassi died.
Yes, yeah, no, that's what I mean.
There were like
I think I
5
just
guys. Two of them died. No, 3 of them died. One of them
it was
retired, and another one went to join Mengsk's mining operation.
yeah, it was Yancey Gray. So they mentioned he dies on Arista Prime or Arisina Prime,
Mm-hmm.
and so he dies to a Spider-Man ambush. So in
Okay.
the later stuff, Victor Kachansky, it's revealed that there was a famous operative named Victor Kachansky who basically committed all these strikes against the Dominion. He was a big famous inventor. He was kind of a hero to the Kelmorians. And when Mengsk takes over, he has him assassinated. And the stated reason is was I want to take his technologies because he was a famous inventor, like a big innovator. The undertone of this book is you killed one of my men, like your operations killed Yancey Gray, so I'm getting my revenge. And that actually leads to his little brother Milo joining Raynor to try to take down Mengsk because the Kelmorians were like, well, we really can't do anything about it. Oh, well. Milo of the default portrait fame. But from the research Mengsk steals, it was a base. He got a bunch of Starship schematics and new Spider-Man schematics, and those schematics are what became the Widow Mine in Heart of the Swarm. So that's how Widow Mines tie into this book.
This guy called Victor Kalansky, which we don't even have a portrait, and then you have the Milo Kalansky, which is the most feared portrait on the ladder. Oh, so our default portrait, his older brother, kinda invented this. Wait.
Yeah, his research led to the Widow Mine, and they develop it a bit in the Project Blackstone series. But yeah, that's the really weird winding history of one of the most hated units in Starcraft.
Huh. I play both Terran and Zerg, and I barely like the Widow Mine. Okay, except when I play against Protoss, because I need that shit. Especially against, ironically, I need them more against Protoss than I do against Zerg.
Back when I played, I used it, or played Versus, I used it pretty extensively. But I haven't done it much lately.
It's always fun to play hard and harder and just go mass Widow Mine, even though it's completely ineffective, but it's just nice to plant those mines. Okay, that's a very interesting about the Widow Mine. Like, how the heck did Dominion Sector? I mean, that's a very interesting winding thread, and it's always nice when history has these ties.
And Arcturus, Arcturus is definitely petty enough to do that because one of the big points is he goes after the ghost that killed his family just because he wants his.
He's a dead. deeply petty man.
Yeah, I mean the whole revolution was his own personal hatred of the Confederacy hurt me. I'm going to destroy them. And if I can get power from it, sure.
And power I will have. So, okay, that's the Widow Mine and little backstory of Milo Kalinsky, whom I never even considered looking up, even though he's the default portrait for some weird reason.
They got a very extensive backstory for him because he's a Kelmorian character that joined Raynor too. So but all those were deleted. I'm working on an effort to try to preserve them.
Who would win in an arm wrestling contest, Milo or Rory Swan? I think
Rory.
It depends on which arm, right? No, but
it's Rory.
But he's a tough dude. Like, look at the muscles on his.
Yeah,
Are you kidding
Milo's
me,
a wimp.
By the way, thank you, Ninja but like, look at him. I mean, unless Milo was piloting a sword, even then it's gonna be a tough fight.
He's a buff dude, thick boy.
he is. Although he looks like he needs a shower, but that's beside the point.
Oh, that's an intentional little.
Yeah, I know.
Get the grimy look.
I know. Why does he have a bolt on his arm? The Twitch chat says.
What does he have? Oh, yeah, I don't know. That he gets his arm chopped off trying to rebel from the Kelmorian Combine. So that actually happens pretty recently.
Yeah, then
But
Raider comes and saves his butt.
hmm
Lady Zephyr says he's just that thick. Well said.
yep.
Well, one day maybe we should do a backstory on Rory here. But that's a.
There's there's not a ton, but there's enough to go into.
I might. Maybe we should do that someday. Okay, but he doesn't appear in this book, so that's outside the scope of this
Mhm.
video. So there's the
So
Kalmorians, and there's Umoja, and then there's
so
the other. Yes, go ahead.
oh no, I was gonna say next we should. I was gonna go into Tyrador because that is a similarly
Oh,
obscure.
I
So if
love
you have the Tyrador
Tyrador.
skin set. So Tyrador was one of the books from the manual. It was a resort world, kind of fancy,
Where's it?
bit of extreme temperatures, bit of superstorms, but
Mm.
generally used as like the vacation area of you got it up, vacation area. And this was actually the first mention of their colonial militia
Mm.
because they show up very briefly. They're very ineffectual, though. I have no clue if this is intentional or not, but at one point Manx looks up and describes their like aircraft as silvery, and this whole skin set is silvery to the point where the name of it in the editor is literally silvery. And I have no clue whether that's like an intentional, whether they dug that deep to get this for this entire skin set, or but yeah,
Well,
the Knights of Tyrador, which is what this is, was what that militia became much later, when they wanted to show off to Guess. It's my favorite skin set because it's all the other ones like this is how this unit is so much better than the default one, and all of the Knights of Tyrador are. They made this look very pretty, and it is completely ineffectual in combat.
yeah, there are a lot of excellent things like the ghost skin. Okay, let's just for fun. Let's just read the ghost of the Emojin and the ghost of the Tyrador in the editor just for fun. The Emojin Shadow Guards. Ah yes, know the Shadow Guards. These elite operatives are employed to keep the secrets of the Emojin protected as well as the priests. Pretty badass. And for the Tyrador is an elite ghost guards, Tyrador's most valuable tourist. Their visors were discontinued after a visiting rock star complained that the mask freaked me out, man.
Yeah, so there's a lot of that with Tyrador. I love that skin set though; it's a good one.
Yeah, I mean, as a slightly sad and depressing note, like that was the last skin set we're getting, like both the building as well as the unit skin set, which still bugs me the hell out because I want my Purifier building skin set. It's already
I,
in the
I,
goddamn co-op because of Phoenix. It's all here. All you need to do is add a Dark Shrine, a Templar Archives, and you're good to go. But and well, in the Shield
yeah,
and
it probably would have happened eventually, but I got my Cerberus set. I'm happy.
oh well. Come on, just release it.
Um,
It's here. Like Minos Marauder skin is 50% in. Like why? Why? It's here. It's in co-op. What the holy?
yeah, but I mean, you
Buy
can't
the
help it if development
Zelnaga.
gets
Okay, I'm
cut.
gonna stop ranting because I ranted about this endlessly. And it's one of my highest Reddit posts. Um, but yeah, I really love Theodore because you do visit the planet. You do get to go as a tourist because Max goes on leave here, and then you get to see I don't know, just kind of like the high life. And it is also sad because after I read that chapter, I just so happened to play the Nova Covert Ops mission that you go to Tyrador,
hmm
and you get to see like a glimpse of how nice this place would have been. And not to mention the COVID lockdown is in effect, so no one gets to go on vacation.
That's true, and it is
Yeah, all of that
it's a fancy
just
resort.
the playthrough. Oh, it's not yet up, but that's going to be the next episode to go live. And a lot of interesting tidbits on Tyrador, like like their symbol is a narwhal or something.
Oh yeah, so there's a lot of that actually also comes from. So Tyrador was from the manual, and
Mm-hmm.
then it shows up. It gets mentioned, but never directly shows up in Ghost Nova. It actually shows up in a lot of places, but it was always in the books, which was why it was very cool to
Mm.
see it in the games finally. Because yeah, it was something that was always mentioned, but never. We see it in some comics, but yeah, it's nice to see it there.
Yeah.
Next to Tyrador
By the way, we're
logo with
talking
that
about
old Team
Tyrador
Liquid logo.
9, not Tyrador 6, which is another mission.
Eight,
Um,
eight, eight.
8, yes, I'm getting these numerals wrong all the time.
It's okay.
Yeah, so 9 and 8. Um, we don't get much of Tyrador 8, which is honestly not really that important. This tourist world is far, far more interesting.
Yeah, 9 was the one that was like, oh, it's a big core rule to the Confederacy,
Mm,
super important, and now it has It's now interesting in the current lore because the last time they cut everything off, there is now a joint Protoss, like fanatical Protoss and Dominion settlement there, and they're just kind of living with each other.
yeah, which
Like
is kind of
they,
interesting because the Tal'Darim showed up to do some stuff in Covert Ops, and then like, you mean the original Protoss didn't say anything about these other Protoss coming and glassing half the planet?
yeah, I mean, well, they don't have, yeah, they aren't super connected, right? At like the Protoss have kept to themselves because they're
Hmm.
rebuilding, and the Tal'Darim are just kind of their own faction. It'd be like if another faction of Terrans invaded, and they'd be like, "Well, why didn't you do anything about it, Dominion?" It's like that's not our faction.
I don't know these people.
Yeah,
That's
the
basically.
Eonri are. I could go for years on the Eonri because I really want to know. They're kind of a Protoss faction that came out of nowhere, but I would like to know
Yeah.
more about them.
Well, we'll
Um,
get into that hopefully one day because you are right. They're very interesting. They're effectively the Stone Protoss, and I love the way Pig says their name, Henry, with like a high pitched tone. But yeah, they haven't been invented yet, both in lore and in book by the time this thing came out.
exactly. Yeah.
Yeah, the Knights of Tenor are also a really, really interesting skin set as you touched on because it is like, again, if you go in game, the descriptions are hilarious.
Yeah.
I love them so much. One of them said something about one of the building skin sets said something about it being a casino. I can't
Yeah, I mean,
remember.
there's a lot of. I mean, it wasn't it was that it was used on the casino. I think it was the reactor used to power it.
Oh yeah, no, I just found one, which is that their fusion core was also
Mm,
used to provide power for casinos, water parks, and robotic message parlors. Um, and yes, the Northwalls, as said in Twitch chat, are the unicorns of the sea, and apparently they're and it was so funny reading this, and their mating season overlapped with a surf contest.
yeah,
I
no,
love that
the
stuff.
Tyradorian narwhals.
Yeah, but
Where did that
unfortunately,
first appear? I'm trying to
yeah,
remember.
but the sad part is that every time you go to Terrador, the place gets messed up.
Yeah, I mean, it's been messed up a few times. The whole story of that skin set was basically a response to it getting invaded the first time because it avoided most of the wars relatively unscathed, and then
Hmm.
later it kind of got messed up.
Yeah, the Tal'Darim attacked, the Zerg attacked. Well, the Zerg attacked, and then the Tal'Darim attacked, and then Nova had to come and save the day,
Hmm.
and then the
And then
Zerg
Cerberus
attacked.
attacks.
The Zerg attacked again, and then Stone Protoss came out of the wood, out of the planet's crust or something, and then actually
Oh no,
no,
they came back.
no,
They
no, they
came
came back
back
from
because that was
space.
their home world initially, and they're like, "Oh, we can. We're just going to come back and reclaim it because we couldn't find Zeratul like we could in co-op." But yeah. Anyway, that's a bit different. But yeah,
That's
it's
very.
supposed to. The planet itself supposed to resemble like the high life of the Confederacy,
Hmm.
but also its discomfort because it's brought up also in a few times with
Oh
one
yes.
of Arcturus's assistants.
So how do you pronounce the
Basically,
name? So
how
Soyana.
yeah, her family was basically a debt slave that had to work in the casinos to pay off like their debt,
They
and that
yeah
she
they make it
escaped by joining the military.
they make it very clear that quasi slavery still exists. Ex-
Sort of, but in more the company store like worker exploitation kind of
hmm,
way. There is on the fringes, but it's more direct slavery is illegal in
hmm.
the Confederacy and Dominion.
I don't think Blizzard could have ever gotten away with having slavery and a nation called the Confederacy, even if they blew it up.
Well, that's true. They already regret the Confederacy. They are. Yeah, that's a big regret.
Mhm. Then everything, and then the Fire Nation attack. Twitch chat says, "God bless America." Twitch chat also says, um, but but yeah. So no, yeah, they do make it. They make it very clear that at least on Terrador, it's a nice place to visit, but a shitty ass place to actually have to live and work. I mean, if
Yeah.
it's bad enough that you ran away to join the military and then ran away to join Octorus.
Well, they got rich at the end. She managed to come out well because she went off him on his prospecting career.
Yeah, but she also got lucky that he had to go take care of a son he never knew and drop the entire prospecting thing and then drop it again to run a revolution.
Yeah,
So,
well, they mentioned that the find that they used there was also used to kind of kickstart the revolution because it got nuked to oblivion, so he had to start from the ground up.
Yeah. Oh, Delver says, oh yeah, I forgot the Confederacy even uses the flag. I'm pretty sure Blizzard wants you to forget as well. But that's neither here nor there. Alright, so speaking of that, let's take a little bit of time to talk about the whole prospecting mining the outer fringes, again, the Wild West, because that's something that wasn't really explored, like the fringe worlds, especially back then when nobody cared because they weren't aware that Protoss and Zerg existed.
Yeah, it was always the core motif of StarCraft
Hmm.
was the Wild West, like the frontier fringes. It's why you go to Marsara and Antigua are like these drab wasteland worlds that you go to in the first game. Like it's Sergeant Lester, it's a bunch of space rednecks who are drinking beer. So that's kind of that. The reason they keep going there is that's the core like identity that they wanted to go for with the Terrans was these are kind of like they aren't the like heroic space rangers. They're a bunch of rednecks that got some power armor.
It is so adept now
and are
that
told to shoot them.
now that you make this comparison so clear. It is now so adept that the UED are European.
Yeah, well, there are a lot of things. I wish they would go more multi-ethnic with them because they're supposed to be a one-world government. And they kind of do that with Lieutenant Morales in Heroes of the Storm, who's Latina. But they now everyone because of Stukov thinks, oh, it's the Russian faction. It's like that they're led by a Frenchman. Their Valkyries are German. Their second in command is Russian. They're supposed to be multi-ethnic.
The medevacs are
resemble the globe.
Who? The science vessels are British or something, right?
No, well, the ones in the sector are the Valkyries are the only UED medics, but they're more American. But those are the UED exclusive ships that the Dominion later kind of steal.
The Valkyries and all. All right, but yeah. So coming back, and the other thing that's really clear in this book that I never appreciated is what life was like before first contact. Because Valerian is like, oh, there must be aliens out there, and then by the time you read Valerian in Evolutions, which is of course after the whole shebang, they're like, yeah, they're aliens and they're trying to kill us, and we want to stop that, and we want to try and stop another war from happening.
But it makes him more. It ties into the Keystone plot where he's the one who's like, I want to find all the relics and understand them. It ties into the Dark Templar saga. It was really to set up like there was a character who had a love of finding these alien relics and understanding them, and in the end set up a character who really wants peace with them and like understanding in the after the conflict had settled and they're like the more cruel elements had been ousted.
Yeah, Stukov. There's a lot of idea and mystery behind the the lack thereof, and yes, Valerian does find some relics thanks to Jake Ramsey of the DT saga. But yeah, it's really interesting because all of the problems that they have in the book I Mengsk, as big as the rebellion on Core Hall is, it would be nothing compared to what happened on Charsara and Marsara, when both the Protoss and Zerg came and basically wiped the planets clean of life.
Yeah, I mean, that led to a larger cultural impact. It's interesting because the numbers change depending on what you look at. Though the loss of life was actually less because those were out there fringe worlds. It just surprised them that anything. Liberty's Crusade has a good quote like, someone out there did this better than we could in terms of wiping out a planet. So the loss of life wasn't the problem. It just it's scary. It just the first contact with alien races is them coming up and just wiping out one of your outer colonies and going, whoops, well, you needed it, bye.
And then Tarsonis happens, let's not forget, thanks to Mengsk, but still, like, the power of the swarm.
Which, and that's one of the things I've always appreciated in StarCraft is everyone thinks it's a Terran, Zerg, Protoss, like, three-way free-for-all, and it's almost always the Terrans and Protoss kind of don't like each other and will occasionally shoot at each other, but there's an objectively evil alien swarm that wants to eat us all. We should probably not really fight all that much until that's out of the way. So even Mengsk is like, he fights the sometimes, but it usually just leaves them alone.
Well, that's the thing. You can't negotiate with the Protoss. You're not supposed to be able to negotiate with the Zerg.
Yeah, well, he does anyway.
Although what you're describing is also exactly the same as IEM Katowice. given the racial distribution.
Well, I
It's
can't
most.
comment on balance,
I
unfortunately.
know it's but it's true. It's true. Like the real fight of StarCraft is mostly PvZ, which is also the same in Broodwar for that matter with how PvZ is going. The Twitch chat says, "I love you, Sarge," which is a great meme. Lots and lots of Stukov, and wiping out planet is dope. Probably.
It is. It is definitely.
Yeah, there's a reason why Exterminatus is so beloved at 40k. Yeah, but again, the Terrans don't really have anything that can do that. Like 100 apocalypse class nukes, which we never really see.
I think it's 1,000.
Or is it
Let me
1,000?
make sure I have that
Many,
right.
many nuke. Yeah, I guess that's mostly covered in Uprisings. I'll get to that eventually. In terms of the technology and a lot of the combat in this book specifically, I Mengsk, it's very small scale action. Like um, compared to Heaven's Devils, where you really follow through the guild wars, this was like a shootout here and there, like almost a police scale shootout as compared to a full scale war. You know?
Yeah, and that was the intention. This was, I mentioned earlier on, this was a small character study. This was Heaven's Devils was made to, it was an exploration of Raynor and Tychus, certainly, but the core of it was an exploration of the Confederate Marine Corps and the Guild Wars, because that was what they're trying to show, the minutia of the organization, the uncaring, oppressive era of the war. Whereas this was a very focused story on the Mengsk family, and it touches on the conflict of Starcraft. And well, I say you can't avoid it, but some books go without any kind of conflict like that. But
I suppose.
yeah, you're right. The conflicts are very small scale, taking over mining installations. The only big shootout is the one battle that starts the Guild Wars, where Duke messes up and Mengsk has to save him. And there's the assassination attempt at the end on Umoja. But yeah, usually, again, the action because it's very much a character story and not a war story. It's the fights are made to be a little more personal and small scale and meaningful. Really, there's Heaven's Devils is all about finding a faceless enemy that you had no clue why you were being sent to kill them, because they're just humans like you. Every fight usually has a reason narratively for the development of Mengsk and Valerian, or Arcturus and Valerian.
That's very true. Of course, Heaven's Devils. I mean, Tychus and Jimmy Boy at the time, but they're just soldiers. They're just being sent into the line of fire to do whatever. And that also contrasts with the DT saga, because there you obviously have a lot more Protoss, Zerg, a lot more fighting. You have the big red Archon to deal with.
Yeah.
Yeah. Alright, so I think that's just about it for the world building. Oh yeah, the tech they use here is very Broodwar, because this is all pre-StarCraft 1. It's actually very easy to follow. I have some gripes about some of the things, especially with the CMC military, which I've asked you about almost immediately.
You mentioned there was a gripe section. I have plenty of those regarding that,
yes.
so I'll save those for gripes.
Alright, yeah. I've also got to save some of them for gripes. Anything else you want to mention for world building? Anything you want to talk about maybe about Core Hall or anything else?
So, I mean, I'm trying to think. There's some minor references that you might not you might catch, where they talk about other old families. And they mentioned the Terra family, Terra being Nova's family. Who was big, and they're the ones who produce a lot of the cars. They're I guess the Porsche of the Starcraft universe. So
is that the one that looks like a Hellion?
Terra cruiser. No. That one comes later. These are more. Though I mean, they never describe them, so they might be.
Yeah. Okay. Because I know all the cars in game kind of look like Hellions.
Yeah, I mean that's because there's a lot of model reuse with that. But in terms of world building, no. It's the one few mentions the UED gets, but it's very brief. Because like I mentioned, the UED's cultural impact are something I really wish they'd explore more, but they have not. This is the one time where it's a force that Terran force that Mengsk can't confront.
Yeah, he loses pretty badly if Kerrigan didn't come and save his ass and then backstab him, as he did, to be fair. Alright, so that kind of concludes the world building. This book did add a lot of world building, Confederacy, and mostly Confederacy and Umoja, because Tyranor is part of the Confederacy, and Dominion later.
But largely Core Hall and the Mengsk family. That's the core of this, is expanding the life Arcturus came from, giving a lot of context for him, and the world building was.
The name is literally a declaration of that, like the title.
Yeah, a bit of a reference to I Claudius. But yeah, it's yeah. So that's basically all we can really say, I guess. It's a core hall book at heart, but it goes beyond that.
Alright, so you wanted to have an additional section to expand upon, how this ties into everything else. We've talked extensively about Uprising because that is a key book about it. Is there anything else you'd like to add on to the how this ties into everything else?
No, I mean, I actually thought that was the world building section, so
All right,
I
so
just covered everything I wanted to there.
all right, awesome. So let's start complaining then, shall we?
Yeah, so this is, in my opinion, the best Starcraft book, so I don't actually have too many complaints about it. I think it's got the tightest focus, it's got the closest thing approaching a theme that you can actually like dig deep into and discuss. There's a lot of these are going to be kind of shallow and more, oh, it's this thing that references this thing, but this that.
Mm-hmm.
But so my biggest complaint is, so Blizzard books are generally pretty well edited. This one has so many typos of like major
Oh
things.
yeah, that's true.
In the intro section, there's like a conversation, and randomly, even in the Legends version, which is the reprint you have, randomly they just change Arcturus' name to Angus.
Yes, there is one section that I caught. They're like, "Oh, Angus." I'm like, "No, that's not who's talking." Wait, what?
Yeah, they talk about, oh, this is someone's from Tyrador 10, and when this is the same book that talks about there are only 9 Tyrador planets. And there's a few little things like that, which is just really uncommon because Blizzard is their editing core is generally really good, and this is kind of where they were getting better about it. So it's strange. I don't understand. It's uncommon. I don't get why that was the case, but
Yeah,
oh
well, you know what they say, the mods are asleep.
well. Well, it's a shame.
Yeah, there
Um,
are a few. No, I mean you don't really catch it on the first view through, but if you actually look at it, like yeah, there are lots of errors. I'm
yeah.
gonna go into my biggest single gripe, which again because I read Heaven's Devils first, and I've complained to you about this. I complained on the Lore Discord, which there will be a link to in the YouTube video. I'm gonna put a link to that actually in the chat right now for guys who somehow are not part of the Lore Discord. Which is the issue.
Dravlik, the coffin nails thing was not a like overt. That's not a complete name for them. That was just, I think that was just the one time they talked about it. There's a lot of weird slang they use, but that was not one of them.
We
Well,
use a
cancer
lot of
sticks
weird,
is another one.
we use a lot of weird slang for cigarettes as well.
Yeah,
I think in HOTS they kind of made Tyker stop smoking for that, but I don't remember.
they did. Yeah, they got rid of his cigar. It's a shame.
It's a shame. It's not like he lived very long anyway.
Well, that's true.
And it's not like a cigar did him in. It was more
No, but
it's his best friend's girl. Never mind, I'm not gonna get to
died.
that. I'm not gonna get that because I have a bigger thing to complain about, which is the nature of resocialization. Because
Yeah.
in
Oh, go ahead. I'll let you start with this.
alright, because I've got a long one. Because in Heaven's Devils, spoilers if nobody's read this book either, they make it very, very clear that it was in the middle of the Guild Wars that resocialization came in, and it's actually a major plot point because both Tychus, the hard ass, and Jimmy, the softy, are both shocked when this technology gets rolled out. But in this book, which happened something like 10-15 years before the Guild Wars, resocialization seems to be normal. Like, resocialized Marines are sent to a recruitment booth, which sounds like a terrible idea.
And for context, for those who don't know, resocialization is what they do to criminals, where they basically nerve state and overwrite their memories to make them very loyal and very like happy and serving soldiers. But they do it by basically overwriting their memories.
And and that's a major point in all of the StarCraft books I've read, which is, to be fair, 3, and one of the comics, actually 2 of the comics, which is that this is one of the more grim dark things about the StarCraft universe.
It's a rather common thing, and it's actually a failing of Heaven's Devils, to be honest, because that came out much later. Well, much later, like 2 years later, than I Mengsk. So really, and it's a shame because I like Heaven's Devils' interpretation much better of the slow rollout.
Yeah.
The way they've kind of wormfully justified it is like, oh, Jim and Tychus and a lot of the like rank and file weren't aware this was a thing, but the more advanced officer corps, of course, and the children, the old families, were well read and knew this was a thing, which doesn't really jive.
No, it
It's
doesn't.
pretty obvious they made a mistake with it. The biggest thing for me, which ties into it, is Heaven's Devils also brought up a lot of like the tech
Mm.
before we see it in the games. The Avenger, which was the precursor to the Wraith, like they hint at the armor that would evolve later to the Firebat armor.
Yeah,
And
yeah.
in this book, they all those original units show up. It's like it's a big old Starcraft one Palooza. Just remember this unit, which it's a shame. I get why they did it, and they, being fair, they had not established that there were these precursor units at the time.
Mm.
But yeah, it lacks it lacks a bit of creativity in showing how later books showed how technology gradually progressed.
Yeah, well, one thing that is clear throughout this book is the progression of technology. It's implied at the beginning that cloaking and personal ghost cloaking was something that Acton did not consider, maybe because it just wasn't invented at the time, and that's how
So
Nova, no, not Nova. That's how Kerrigan and Gang got the
Carrion.
drop on
So it's beyond
Angus.
that. No one knew ghosts existed. It was kept completely quiet.
Mm.
Nobody knew up until basically the like towards the beginning of the games that like most people believe psychic powers were just bull. They had an academy to help them,
Mm.
but people would mysteriously die in them. That actually happened to Rainer's son, who's only brought up in the books, who is definitely not Stone. Um,
Yeah.
but yeah, so at that point they didn't consider it. Like they had the cloaking tech and all that. They just didn't. At that point, it was all under wraps. So
Yeah, a lot of secrecy, but again, that doesn't explain the resog. Oh, by the way, Davik says that Speed of Darkness goes into resocialization a lot.
yes, the
It's a big
entire
thing.
book is on resocialization. That whole book, and it's one of my favorites.
Okay, I'll see if I can find that at my local library. Um, let's see. Ghosts did exist except for a training academy, shockingly like a Japanese high school.
Oh, Jay Barino, no, it has. I didn't mean to imply it's been disproven. I was trying to be serious that it is totally stone.
Okay, well, we'll get into that another day because I need to finish
Yeah,
Covert Hops. Um,
yeah. There's nothing in there that, aside from hints, I can tell you that there's nothing on his origins.
yes, the
It's just
Twitch.
my own conspiracies.
Shut your mouth when you're resocializing. I think they do put it in gag because of the tongue thing. But yeah, that was my biggest gripe because I really like the idea, especially like the way it was written in Heaven's Devils, like the shock. And they say resocialized Marines go into combat, and it looks like how I treat my Marines in TVT. Oh,
Yeah,
go and charge that siege tank. Half of you will get through. And Tigers and Jimmy are like, no, we're not doing this. We're gonna
yeah,
fight like
and
this.
it's an odd thing that Speed of Darkness is brought up. I like the way they rolled out resocialization, Heaven's
Mm,
Devils, but Speed of Darkness brings a little more nuance to it as a concept, where it's more sloppy and something that it's factory press soldiers basically, and
yeah.
they aren't the perfect soldiers, but they're whatever they need to fight in that situation. That's their motivation and memories. Whereas
Mm,
this one, they're more like completely loyal, and they kind of justified in that there's different kinds. Even
yeah.
I Mengsk brings up that there's an older version where you can see the nerve staples um, and the surgery scars. But
Which is
yeah,
how they discover that these guys are resogged.
yes,
Marines. It's also brought up in the Keep, which I've done a video on, which mentions that resocialization technology has changed over time. It's gotten better. It's gotten more precise
yeah.
and
They
stuff.
for Ghost they just use it for memory wipes because they don't do it to literally like nerve staple them into submission as much
I
because
don't.
they need a free thinking soldier, but they use a limited version of it to basically like,
Yeah.
well, you can't tell it people at the last operation if we wipe it. That gets into the Spectre plot because Terrazine undid the mind wipes, which was the biggest threat to Mengsk.
Yeah, Ghost Covert Ops is also going through that. I just finished one of the missions where she's taking microdoses,
Mm,
surrounded by Zerg. So that was interesting. That was a hard ass mission.
yeah.
My gosh,
Oh,
took
I
me
just use nukes.
it took me like four. I eventually cleared it using Mass Liberator because I
Oh,
it
okay.
took me 3 freaking playthroughs to realize that her damn liberators shoot buildings.
Yeah, yeah. That's a bit of a difference.
Okay, but okay, so that's one thing about resocialization. The other thing that I haven't brought up to you yet, and I do want to ask you now. Oh, Sikado says no. You mean Master Raven? No, I can't micro the Ravens for shit. So I didn't bother. I suppose you can. I might do that as a meme someday. But the other issue I had with this book is that isn't the Guild Wars timeline a bit wrong? Because it says that the Guild Wars only lasted like a few years, and you start, and then Max leaves, and then he's already a prospector, and the Guild Wars is about to end. So
Yeah, no, it's the correct timeline. Yeah, the Guild Wars is only I think 4 years long, which hilariously it means it's the longest war that occurs that we know of, or longest continuous war. Because all the other wars,
3
Great
years,
Wars,
I think.
the first Great War is only half a year, Brood War is only half a year, Second Great War is 2 years,
Oh, that's
and
it.
End War is 1 year.
Oh, I thought like StarCraft 1 plus Broodwar was like 3 years. StarCraft 2 was like just under 4
Nope.
years. Huh.
Yeah, the entirety of Starcraft 1 and Brood War takes place 2499 to 2500. And then there's a 4 year time skip where there's a bunch of stuff in between.
Lots
And
of
then
books.
Starcraft Wings of Liberty's 1 year, Heart of the Swarm's 1 year, Legacy of the Void is 1 year, and then a 2 year time skip to the epilogue. I have obsessively kept track of the timeline. It's one thing
I need to do a
I've
timeline
tried to
episode. I need to do
solidify.
a timeline episode update. Oh yeah, he says go
There's a lot to talk about.
Yeah, he says go Mass Raven with the Spider Mine upgrade. I actually did upgrade my Ravens to Spider Mines, but I keep forgetting to use it. Also, that mission was tough because Corruptors kept killing my Ravens. After a while, I gave up on it because I needed the gas for my Liberators.
Yeah, I just built a lot of nukes, and I just defended my base and used Nova to nuke everything. That's how I beat that mission.
But don't you need to
Nukes
send
are
it?
fun.
Oh right. Once you nuke the place out, you just send Nova to just stand there because there's nothing left.
Yeah, the only problem is you need to be on top of sniping overseers, but that's a different. We'll get into that topic maybe another time.
All right. Right. So okay. So the timer is correct. Let's see what other gripes do I have. I had this really weird gripe that I I love this comment in the Twitch chat. The wiki editor is obsessive about something in StarCraft. Seems sus. That's a good one.
That's true.
That's a good one. Yeah. The other thing that really stood out, and I complained about this in the Discord, was there's this scene. It's just a single scene, but I gotta complain about this. There's a single scene where it's mentioned that Mengsk gets off a dropship. It's specifically a dropship I checked. And then it says, oh, he gets off, his squad gets off, and then a siege tank gets off. And then I went back to the book and counted the number of people who got off that dropship, and it was 6. And then I went to check the dropship, like you can only take 4 Marines and a siege tank.
Yeah, I take it as game. So one thing is also established is there are a lot of dropship variants, and you're right that based on what we know, that would probably fill the dropship. You could even just say there's 2 in the cockpit, but yeah, that never bothered me that much. Because you could easily also justify it as cramming, because Speed of Darkness also goes into, I think it's like what, 12 Marines in a dropship, something much more than you'd see. But our good friend Robert, who made the cannon scale chart that they use, yeah, it's a bit of a stretch, but it's doable.
I guess they shoved somebody in the tank then.
That could be. It's a seat. If we go by gameplay, yeah, it's not quite matching up.
That was
but gameplay has weird things like Reapers taking up 2 slots and Ghosts taking up 2 slots too. So what can you do?
I think somebody on DeviantArt attempted to justify it like humorously that they need more gear and Ghosts need more space and some weird stuff like that, which
there's a scene. The intro to StarCraft Ghost before they canceled it was the fact that Nova was in the back, like spaced out with everyone away from her.
Yeah, she
no
gets the VIP seat.
And that one did have the correct number because I think it was 4 Marines and 1 Ghost.
Yeah,
maybe
which is kind of funny because StarCraft 2, a Ghost, does it take 2 spaces in the medevac? I don't know, right? Ghost is only 1 space in the medevac, I think.
It's probably in 2. I'm pretty sure it's 2 and 1. I could.
Yeah, that garbage. This is the kind of complaints I'm on board for. That Ghost Big Mommy Milkers take up extra space. Well, maybe she needs to keep her rifle clean because it's a precision weapon and you gotta use those. But yeah, that was one that I read it and I remember this is the first time, like after the resocialization, because nothing checked. I read it and then I reread that like 5 times. Like, wait, these numbers are wrong. Like, you can't do
Yeah,
that
I
in
mean,
Broodwar.
dropship numbers change a bit. That's a common thing.
Uh,
I've no That's a kind of complaint because StarCraft is such, and it's something I've appreciated about it, is it's willing to go, wow, this gameplay mechanic's stupid. We're not including this in the book. And they do that with a number of things, like how
yeah,
they don't have a wraith stop to shoot, for example, which was always the one people like when they want to be clever they bring up. It's like, why do aircraft stop?
I'm more curious how that thing lands.
Yeah, there's been some concepts. I've heard it like fold to the side. There's a lot of various things I've seen, like, or it folds out like they hand you
Yeah, it
looking at it's a TIE
was.
fighter. Yeah, an immortal, like Davik said, immortal shoot up where they don't normally. The drop shot.
Yeah, so here's the race that I'm still curious how the damn thing lands. It gets
Yeah,
featured.
that we've never seen. The only time we've seen them land is in the last Nova Covert Ops mission where the bottom is taken off for repairs and you see the top half. It's in a doodad just randomly through the map.
Yeah, and I'm like, all right. Anyway, yeah. So why land when you
So,
can keep flying forever? Well, to be
so
fair,
I actually. Okay.
my waves never need to land, so that's a separate issue. They never live long enough either, especially
No,
my
that's
brute
true.
war waves.
Wraiths. No one builds them, so it doesn't matter. But so my last complaint, because I actually do have another
Yes,
one,
yes,
is
please.
this book has, I think, too many overt, like wink nudge moments of, yeah, see, this is a thing that's going to be brought up later. The minion section, for example, where it makes like this name sounds very regal, and its name
Mm.
is Dominion section, or like they go like, they don't have a ghost of a chance of getting in here. Like
Yep.
there's just so many nods to future events that just get it. Some of them are clever, and then some of them get a little grating after a while of like, oh, we get it. You're referencing the future.
Well, I did like a lot of the things. Um, I did
Yeah,
like I did like the ghost one. I admit.
there's the prom Arcturus goes to where it's the theme is alien invasion. Um, and again, I like a little bit of foreshadowing like that. I just think
Mm,
they were in a little heavy on it. It got a tiny
it's
bit excessive
it's true.
because
It's
the
yeah.
whole
No, no,
book
go
is
ahead.
made to parallel his reign. But yeah, that's
The dog's on the roof with a grabby bit. Yeah, maybe, but that sounds like a very inefficient hanger. Yep. Suburban complaining about StarCraft. Say it hits so.
Hey, I really like this book. It's probably one of my favorite pieces of StarCraft media. So my complaints are fairly minor in the
Hmm.
grand scheme of like, hey, this is one of the starting points I always recommend.
I'll make sure I
I don't
bring.
recommend.
Yeah,
Oh,
go
go ahead.
ahead.
I said I don't. I know if people are like, oh, you can play this at the games. I do not recommend you do that. As a matter of fact, I think it's good to read this alongside Uprising. It's very connected, and I think you
Hmm.
get a little more if you have some context going in. But if you like the games and like, I want to know more, I think this is a good spin-off point um, to start at least. Especially if you like the character of Mengsk, because unlike a lot of Blizzard stuff, it's always clear that there's never a point where he's like, well, if only things were a little different. It's like, no, he's always been self-serving. He just got the opportunity.
Yeah, that's something I did like about this character. Which the more I made it think, it became like one of the best villain things because it's never one thing. Like he had plenty of chances to do other things, and he's still the same selfish asshole. It's just that by the end, you can see him um for the cartoon villain he kind of is.
I wouldn't say cartoon villain, but he's definitely someone who he's to me he's a very real kind of evil because he serves again, he convinces you to do the logical thing, and it sounds logical, and you might even believe it makes sense for you, but in the end, he is out to serve himself,
Yep.
and that's how he rises to power through this use of charisma, coercion, uh, basically convincing everyone that he's the answer to the corruption. And being fair, the situation he was in, where everything was incredibly corrupt, allowed him to rise to power. But Yeah.
Absolutely. That's really what he is. Character study of the book. Um, all right. Any other complaints for IMAX? If not, we are actually kind of done, and we are half an hour. We are
Yeah.
about
No,
20 minutes over time.
that's it for me. That's all I wrote up. Again, I love this book, so I'll have more complaints in the future when if we decide to do others.
Yeah. All right. So that's kind of any. All right. So as a conclusion, yeah, this is a great book. Everybody in the Twitch chat should read it. I do think it's a good book. It's easy to pick up. I've said so in my previous overview videos, and yeah. Well, with this done, I still have to do my long form full goes through the book and talk about all the points. I'll probably do that over the next couple of weeks. I'll let you guys know. Um, do Legacy of the Zeldaga next time with
I
sub, please.
I hate you, Jay Barino. Shadow the Zelnaga.
There you
You'll hear
go.
that a lot. Shadow the Zelnaga is by like a country mile the worst piece of media Blizzard's ever published. And I think in general, like of any franchise, it's so bad. But the meme is all has always been that people want me to review it because I have nothing nice to say about that book.
So we're taking the Artosis approach to streaming. There are we? Did you just go there and you
People want to
start?
see me salty. I'll need a lot more drinks in me if I'm gonna tackle that book. It's a very short one. It's one of the first ones they did, and it's really bad.
Well, I Mengsk. One thing I do like about I Mengsk is the consistency. Is they do like their liquor.
Oh yeah, so that's the subtle thing, and that's a subtle inner thing that runs.
Hmm.
Did Dark Templar Saga introduce like Valerian likes Tawny Port, Arcturus likes Ruby Port, and some people thought it got a little heavy-handed because they do bring it up a lot. And then they had Angus drinking White Port just in an off scene, which is like, oh, that's a neat little,
Yeah,
like that's
yeah,
a neat,
okay.
tiny little nod that they don't hammer in because oh boy, they hammer the port thing in later. They bring it up a lot.
I even the video games of like that's the one thing that stood out. Like, yeah, this is the one thing that's consistent that was brought in to like the Starcraft 2 is how much they love their booze, basically.
Oh yeah, no, there is so much booze in the StarCraft universe.
Mm. Yeah, like the moment. Oh, by the way, I gotta go back to the Twitch chat because the moment chat Legacy of the Zanaga was brought up, the entire Twitch chat exploded. Like, yes, yeah, they're basically chanting, "Do it, do it, do it."
No, you can't make me. You gotta buy me better beer.
Well, this is his Twitter. You can go and follow Suburban, and I don't know how you sent him money for beer, but I guess we could make that some sort of a. Look, I don't know. I'm just talking out of my butt right now, but um,
No, it's okay.
I have. We'll save that. We've got legitimate books like the Dark Templar Saga to go through. Um, oh well. So since we're at the conclusion, let's talk about what I know him IRL. I will deliver a case. I don't know if that's currently legal given the COVID situation, but I don't live where you live, so things are different.
It's legal as long as yeah. You just gotta be careful.
Uh,
And yes, I know that'll happen. Hey, yeah,
don't
I'll
step
tackle that.
don't step on a widow mine. Yeah. Okay. So come back to that. Okay. So let's talk about some of the future projects that I might have in the work. Again, thank you for coming on. I'll give you a chance to plug a few other things, a few other closing notes since we're at the end of the show. Um, okay. One thing I have talked to you about is I do want to do one for the Dark Templar saga. Um, okay. Since you're the lore expert, like the Dark Templar saga seems to be a seminal, key, important insert grandiose word here piece of literature to the StarCraft universe.
Not real.
No.
It is a good introduction to the general surrounding
Hmm.
universe. Honestly, it doesn't. The big thing about the Dark Templar saga is it's rather contained. You honestly, it ties in a little of the games. It sets up Protoss culture, which they use for Legacy of the Void. But honestly, I Mengsk is probably the more important work of the
All
two.
right.
And Dark Templar saga is important. I mean, I would say so. But yeah, you can. The story of the Dark Templar saga just there's a lot of world building moments, but the story itself is so contained
That's true.
to a cast of characters you don't really see. In fact, the biggest thing it serves is before we do it, you should probably try the Enslavers maps, which were bonus maps they put out for StarCraft One and Broodwar,
I will
which
admit I
explained it.
have. I will admit I have tried and I can't do it.
It's very tough.
It is
Enslavers 2 is
ungodly
brutal.
difficult. My gosh.
It is.
I
Enslavers 1's okay. You can if you can manage Enslavers 1, and that one's not as important. But
okay.
Enslavers 2 is
No, I
very
remember
brutal.
there's a map that you play as both Terran and Protoss. I'm like, oh sweet, I get the best of both. I tried going ground, I couldn't do it. I tried going mass battle cruisers, couldn't do it. Tried going mass carriers, couldn't do it. I'm like, if the Golden Armada can't win this, I don't know what can.
It'll
And
be
I
great
don't
fleet
want
at the
to
time,
invoke
but
power overwhelming, so
yeah, Enslavers 1 isn't quite as important, but Enslavers 2 sets up Ulrazaj, who's the main villain,
yeah,
they even
which
reference it, and even reference some of the sillier moments from the old Enslavers maps there, which is kind of fun. But
yeah, I
yeah,
might
that can be another future episode.
yeah, so there's the Dark Templar saga we might go through. I'm currently playing through Covert Ops, so I'll probably do a lore episode at the end of that since Covert Ops was the last, honestly, the last truly canon StarCraft expansion that we've gotten.
In terms of games, yeah, though there's a good amount of stuff after. But in terms of games, you're correct.
Yeah, I mean, we can't count the co-op stuff because that's semi-canon at best.
Well, yeah, that also happens before all that. But
Correct.
there's the Dark Horse run of comic books, there's the War Chest, there's the skin sets, and then there's Evolution, of course.
Yeah,
But that's about it.
correct. I mean, that was the latest, like, actual gameplay, like, you go in and you control an army kind of thing. Yeah, I also want to finish my comic read-through before Blizzard decides that it's not worth hosting on their website, which has happened
Uh,
before.
well, I'll talk about that in my plugs, but I have it all hosted, so you don't
Yes,
need to worry
we'll
about
definitely
that.
bring that back up. Thank you for saving. Like, they had all the nice unit laws and nice pictures, and then oh, we're gonna take down our website. Like, but
Oh,
why?
I have ranted about this, and that's my big next effort is to try to preserve the unit pages.
Yeah, especially like when newer players come into like the Reddit and stuff, because StarCraft 2 is still growing, it's still getting traction. Then and old players returning, it's like, oh, that's all you have is like, you
Yeah, the new
look at it.
website's not great, and they've really kind of shifted to esports when initially there was a big focus on the lore side. It's a shame because the lore side, the campaign is still the most popular aspect in terms of players that come in for it.
Yeah. It just reminds me of the quote where Valerian is saying like, well, what was it like to walk through the streets of Core Hall before it all got nuked to hell? And here we are.
Well, it won't ever die as long as
No,
people
it
will give
won't.
them
It
money.
won't. Broodwar is actually doing something really amazing, which they're trying to create like an isolated server in case Blizzard ever pulls the plug.
Hmm.
So that's okay. That's the Broodwar. I will get to that in StarCraft eventually, hopefully. Yeah. So there's that. I want to finish Shadow Wars, and we'll probably have someone on to talk about. I do really enjoy talking about lore and stuff. Again, thank you for coming on.
Yeah, thank you.
All right. So that's kind of it for me. Anything you want to plug apart from your
Um,
Twitter, which you
well,
guys should follow if you haven't
the
done so.
problem is most of chat I recognize as either on my lore server or my IRL friends, so it's hard to really plug anything.
Yeah.
um, but yeah, I mean, I have a Twitter. Most of you are probably on my lore server. If you're not, the people who are just here to drink and yell at me. Um, the I have on the top there is my big compilation of all the short stories. There's also the comics I backed up. So if you want to check out all the short stories, there's about 1,000 pages of them.
Hmm.
So yeah, that's all I got to plug. Keep liking StarCraft or harassing me, one or the other.
Yeah. It says you're a little pog champ. That garbage says.
All right,
All right.
so that's all
So.
I got.
All right. Well, again, thanks for coming out. This has been really fun. I hope to have you back again when we go through the Dark Templar saga. I'll get a few other fans as well on board. Hopefully, we'll get a bit more traction for that. But of course, again, for those who are tuning in, thank you very much. I hope you like this presentation podcast. I didn't even know what to call it. Um, at the time, hopefully, it gives some enjoyment for those who are trying to get into the law side, which has kind of been neglected by Blizzard. I'm just gonna say it outright.
Yeah, it's never been truly neglect. It's got a bit of neglect, but in spite of the popular perception, because I used to talk to the devs when we had them a decent bit. There was still a very big love for the lore side on it. There was a deep care and want to do things right, basically. So
yeah.
it's not forgotten, and there's still a lot of fans out there. So I keep it up.
You say that, and my brain immediately went to when there were devs.
Well, yeah, that when there were, it's true. When there were devs, most of them moved on to Frost Giant or have been shifted to other projects.
Yeah.
So I mean, there's really not a there's a few people that are designated to keep the lights on, but there's not a designated dev team.
Well, you're the one guy who's like standing outside the building with a big flashlight, trying like shining around, like keep some light to what this is.
I try, but I don't know all that much. But I
we do what we can. Again, thanks for coming on. I think I'll just wrap it up. Oh, thanks for the subs, that garbage to all those who were lurking. Wow.
God dang it, Babbage.
Thank you very much to giving all these subs to all the people. Since you're a cool dude, you're the real MVP. You know, things like that are giving us hope to keep the lights running and to do what we can. I'll try to think of something I can do for you next time. Thanks for coming on again.
Yeah.
Wow. Akadots has a.
Thanks, Babbage. I love you. Babbage is my best friend, so he's literally
man.
Right.
Babbage, are you Terran Protoss, by the way? Since I should ask. I don't know. I'm just really touched that you guys died. Thank you. I don't know what else to do except for make the Zergling dance.
He does that.
Yeah. I mean, there's it's definitely good again. Thanks a lot, Hello Protoss, but not for any good reasons. As somebody who's currently playing Zerg, yes indeed. Okay, I'm not going to go into a balance fan. I don't want to keep Suburban here any longer. Again, thank you all for tuning in. Thank you especially Dead Garbage for tuning in. Thanks. I'm just going to read out all those who came as Nidesh SC2, Davik, Adrian, Hero of course from my side. Bitch about balance, it's delicious. Maybe don't worry. We are here to give you lore complaints, so let's try to differentiate ourselves from Artosis. Okay, but again, I'm not gonna keep you up. It's probably late where you are. You've got a day ahead.
I gotta head out, unfortunately, but yeah, it's been good chatting with you, and this was fun.
All right, I'll notify all of you guys when it's out on YouTube. Honestly, don't expect too much editing. I'm just gonna put it down there, kind of put it down, and it's all gonna be great. Again, thank you all for tuning in. Oh, one last thing. For those guys, do follow me on Twitter. I try to post anything I have. My content is a mix of 1v1, but I also want to, as mentioned, do like some of the lore stuff. And I forgot I did this. Huh. Okay. Anyway.
Oh.
Yeah, I basically made like a
GG.
I specifically chose this map because I knew it had like the biggest space in base.
Yeah, Void Launch is the best one to do that. Usually people do it out in the middle. So that's a good...
Yeah, but I didn't want like the hybrids wrecking my artwork.
Yeah.
Please say that was a flex on Apod. No, there's a flex on Amon. We should go into Amon and the hybrid someday. Oh man, I love those hybrids. I love blowing them up. Okay, but
I have a lot of thoughts on.
All right, we've got so much to talk about. Again, when you do something more stuff, let's see if there's any